Hey, howdy fellas. How's it going? I'm here with who are you anyways?
Fuck Floyd.
Oh yeah. Oh, you know what? Hold on. They can't even hear you. All right, say that again. Who are you?
Oh, Buck Floyd these days.
Oh, there we go. I had to bring the volume down a little bit, but you can maintain that volume. I adjusted it for you. Okay. So
Alrighty.
what do you do? What is it that you do?
What
My
is it that
man.
I do? I just
Yes.
fucking rant about the government.
You rant about
That's
the
about
government.
it.
Okay. Well, I'm very similar in that way, you
And I
could say.
drink.
Oh, I'm just
As
drinking
Hunter
water.
S. Thompson said, fish swim, birds fly, I drink.
Hmm. Fish swim, birds fly, I drink. How can I
Yeah,
put
man.
myself into that? I want to say I smoke, but I don't even do that very well anymore. I guess I think. I'm getting off of
Dude,
the
it
weeds here,
kills
though.
me now, though, man.
Hmm.
Like,
Really?
it just kills my lungs. And it's not from that, it's from the cigarettes that it's
Oh,
fucking
yeah.
with my lungs that much.
Yeah. They fuck with my exercise. That's why I had to quit cigarettes, is I was trying to get healthier. And especially when I tried to work out, I couldn't I couldn't catch my breath a lot of the time, and that was the problem. I'd go up
Yeah.
a single flight of stairs, and I'd just
Dude, yeah, one
lose my
flight of
breath.
stairs and I'm done.
Yeah, that's kind
That'll
of the
do me
problem,
in.
isn't it?
I started trying to get back into exercising and stuff until, oh, God. Running was definitely the worst, just on my lungs.
Trying to pull up the chat here so I can keep track of everybody if indeed people
The
have questions.
audience.
Yeah, exactly. Those few people who come up for the live shows. And by the way, people, show up for the live shows. Why don't you? I know that I don't have chat integrated with the visual aspect or anything yet, but we are working on that. And really, I'm not going to add it till there's people here. What's the point in scrolling 2 lines of chat across the screen and showing
That's true.
your beautiful thoughts if there's only one person just jacking himself off? So let your friends
Exactly.
know. Give us a like. Give us a share. We're fighting
Get
the
the word
algorithms
out.
hard. Just to preface things here, but yes, today I will be talking to Buck Floyd. We have a few different topics that are up for discussion on the table today. We have some major agreements in how this government is run. We have probably some pretty serious disagreements as well, but I won't let that hold. I won't hold that against you, and I'm sure you won't hold that against me. We come from a similar history here on YouTube. I
Yeah,
think we
man.
met each other through The Amazing Atheist, wasn't it? Or
Yes. Or,
maybe, anyways. I don't know. I think I actually found your
actually,
channel organically. Maybe it was
you may
Repsion.
have.
I think you responded to a Repsion video, didn't you? Or something.
Ah, that would have been it, because that's how I used to get on my viewers, man, was with the video response feature.
Yeah. And it's all gone now. All gone.
Yeah.
It's a
That was like
bitch
the
these
best
days to break
feature they
out.
had, man.
They need to bring it back. Bring it back. Yeah, the first video I saw of yours actually was... Ah, fuck, they're telling me my sound is bad. I'm gonna have to
Is it?
restart OBS probably. I tested it 3 fucking times before we went live today. My God, man.
What's bad about it?
Well, it probably doesn't show up bad for you. It's just OBS. It has this sound problem where my mic will just go to shit for no reason. Maybe I'll try deleting the mic and adding it back. Let's try doing that. And then we'll get this show on the road, folks. I know that we're delaying here. Just bear with me. Hey,
So
let's
we can
see.
extend this as long as we need to.
Absolutely. This is all going to get edited up for the final show anyway. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm probably going to switch to Streamlabs.
Yeah, that's true. We could have gone this whole fucking thing and not even known.
Okay, how's my audio now, folks? What's it sound like? Let me know. Gimme.
They respond.
Yeah. I'm waiting for them. They're still here.
I'll try not to get too trash during this show.
Sometimes streaming devices switch up your mic because of loss of connections. I wouldn't know, man. I'm very fucking new to streaming. It says that I'm really quiet though right now for some reason. Oh, because I had gain on before. I'll just turn up my pre-gain. Hold on. Test. Okay, we're good now. I think.
No.
He says it's still bad. Fuck. Okay. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. I'm gonna close the stream and reopen it because that's what I had to do last time. So fucking A. Just reload the page in like 10, 15 seconds. Okay.
I was never a fan of live stuff.
Yeah, me either. It's
live. I mean, it's just a
it's
pain in the ass.
notoriously-
It's so easy to fuck up.
exactly. Because that's what I had to do last time. So yeah, I hear it. Just reload the page in like 10, that's how it sounded. Seconds. Yeah, it was fucking. Oh, yeah. It just kind of like pops and glitches around.
I was never
it's
a fan
like
of live stuff.
yeah, me either. It's
what the fuck? Just like season out. So easy to fuck up.
Exactly. Okay, it's good now. Sweet.
Dope.
Fucking A. All right, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a few topics on the docket today, and I've never done this before, so I'm going to appear unprepared, but we will learn as we go, and hopefully each conversation we have in the future gets better and better. I have in the future plans to interview or discuss with the amazing atheist here on YouTube. I'm hopefully going to be getting more people. I have another friend who's an anarchist who I know in person, who does jujitsu, is a very skilled jujitsu artist, if that is an art. Well, it is an art form, obviously, martial art form. But he's going to come on the show at some point. I've got other people that I hopefully maybe like to have Repsy on at some point. I don't even know what that fucker's up to lately. I know he's still occasionally doing shit on Onision, which, talk about beating a dead horse. He's like, he is beyond irrelevant at this point. I mean, just take the knife out, man. He's done. Anyways, so the first discussion that I'd like to open up. Well, okay, to preface this, I think we should each just give maybe a little minute-long explanation of how we view government and politics. Okay. If you think a minute is, you can go a little over if you want to, but just don't, totally blast us with as many. Yeah, just give me your little spiel on how you view government, how you view issues of politics. Go.
Well, if this gives you any frame of reference, about 10 years ago, I started watching Alex Jones and got super into conspiracy theories, and I've never trusted the government since then. And, up until recently, I had very different political views beyond that than I do now. But mostly, I just believe in very limited government. I think generally, you give them an inch, they'll take it a fucking mile. So I try not to give them that inch. And that's basically it.
Nice. Well, we have some similarities there. So if I were to encapsulate my general philosophy, I think a guy on YouTube, Paul's Ego, said it best, and I was highly influenced by these early skeptics on YouTube and how they kind of viewed issues like this. And I came from the tradition of right-wing libertarianism. Ron Paul was my guy. Basically, the government should get totally out of the way, and the marketplace can generally solve all of these things on its own. And when I started hearing these more egalitarian ideas, it changed a few things in me and made me reevaluate it, looking at things like behavioral economics and how people they're not very good at economics. They can't really make these decisions in a very intelligent way. There's a lot of fucking up that goes on, and as a result, there's a lot of misuse and abuse in the marketplace, unfortunately. And I tend to see government as a check on the marketplace where it can. Obviously, there's areas where the government oversteps its bounds, and that's clear and that's obvious. And so we should have very clear limitations set on government. But generally speaking, I would say on average, where I would probably differ from you is that I tend to see the marketplace and private tyrannies, corporations, as the larger threat. I would say government can be a threat, but generally when I look around and I look at all the things that they do wrong and they do poorly, it's usually because that they are doing it in the defense of these corporations, and they're doing it because those people have bought them, or there's an incentive problem there. And I do believe in reforming government. Ultimately, that's my goal, is to reform government and make it better. And I tend to look at society from a macro picture rather than an individual picture, where, I may have a more individualist perspective when I talk to a buddy down the street, like, man, you got to get your life in order. You got to stop doing drugs and really focus on, what are you going to do next? Are you going to go to school? Are you going to do this? You got to, in some respects, yeah, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But I look at government in a different way. I look at government as like, how is it going to help you? And that's more or less where I want the society to reflect a situation where when you're born, I got this admittedly from Paul's ego, but it's one of the things that really stuck with me. When you're born and you don't know what you're going to ultimately be, you have the best chances to become something. So, is there a 5% chance that you're going to be rich and then an 80% chance you're going to be poor? Or is there, a 80% chance you're going to be at least decently off, and then maybe there's a 20% chance you're rich or something? And so I just want a generally egalitarian society, with some level of meritocracy, of course. So I think I took way longer than a minute. I apologize about that. But
all right, man.
It's hard to get these things out in a short span. That's something I'm constantly
and I know
trying
exactly
to work on.
what you mean, though.
Yeah.
Your stance on the purpose of government is exactly what my stance used to be before I went to Australia. I believed that the government should be there to benefit its people. That should be its purpose. How can it improve your life? I think generally speaking, this is something I should have brought up earlier, actually.
Okay.
There's positive, I don't know if you're familiar with this terminology, there's positive rights and negative rights, right?
I have
negative rights are the ones I'm most concerned with. The rights the things that you're born with innately, that you need to limit the government's ability to restrict those rights, right? And then other things, like the positive rights, are a nice bonus, but I think if you don't absolutely protect the negative rights first, then it doesn't even matter. So that's sort of my stance on that.
I'm pulling up negative and positive rights just for those who may be watching so they can get a little bit of context if they're interested, because this is the first time I'm doing this and I'm kind of wondering what I should be showing. I thought theoretically I could just put us up directly next to one another in a traditional fashion, but I didn't know to what degree that was, how that would look or how plausible it would be. But how our camera's set up, that it looks like that might have actually been a very good idea. So maybe I'll do that next time. But for now, I'm just showing my desktop. I thought I would look up relative information while we're going through this. But I guess since we're already on the topic, let's just for the first topic, let's just talk about the role of government, because that's one of the things that we wanted to hit on here. So if you were to outline the things that government definitely should handle, what would you say?
Right.
Give me 3, or if you want to give me 5 things, you can give me 5 things that the government should handle, and you think there's relatively little chance that those things could be handled on the private market per se.
Right. Well, one thing. So I'm a big Rand Paul supporter, and there was a policy he was pushing for recently that I actually was super opposed to. He wanted to privatize the national parks and state parks, and I thought that was a fucking terrible idea. Because, like, on the one hand, I think generally speaking, private businesses do a better job at what they're doing than government does. Because if they don't do a good job, well, they lose business. But when it comes to something as important as our national parks, that's not something I want fucked with. Like, I don't want these people to be able to do whatever they want with this land and start charging money for people to enter and all of that. I think that should be left to the government. So I would have them in control of that.
Okay.
We obviously need government for our defense, for the military. I would drastically decrease our military spending, but that's obviously necessary. I think, well, the main thing, obviously, we need laws to protect our rights. So we need government for that. I'm not an anarchist. I'm a libertarian. Okay. I believe in very limited government, but we do need government. What else? What else would I say we definitely need government
for? So the third one was rights? Protect our rights?
What's that?
The third one was to protect our rights. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Cool.
Property rights, your right to life,
Okay.
all that stuff. Of course, we need laws to protect those things. And we need law enforcement. So there's another thing. We
Okay.
need
Number 4.
enforcement of those laws.
Protect our rights and
Trying to
laws.
think.
Okay.
Um,
Just taking notes.
Generally speaking, I think the government is involved in way more than it needs to be.
Anything
And
else? Just
where I
I mean,
disagree with you.
what about schools? Public schools.
Oh, well, I mean, I support public schools existing. I wouldn't say that they're exactly the pinnacle of success as
Yeah.
far as schooling goes. I think they're run fucking terribly the way they are at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I
I
can
think
agree with that to an extent. To an extent. So I mean, parks, defense, protecting your rights / the police, are your big 3 there. I mean, what about environment? I mean, do you see the government having a role in addressing climate change, as it were?
Oh, climate change is a very interesting discussion.
Oh,
Yeah,
certainly.
I mean, like what I would do is mostly have,
Oh,
as far as the government's involvement in that,
sorry. Hold on a
be
sec.
to,
My audio got okay. What was that?
I would say mostly as far as the government's role in that,
Okay.
we should
What about environment?
have
I mean, do you
them
see-
fund to invest in improving renewable energy and things of that sort.
Okay.
Because as it stands right now, I am not at all satisfied with the state of renewable technology.
Mhm.
And I watched a very interesting TED Talk recently that fundamentally changed my opinion on renewables, actually. And I think that them at the moment is just in private individuals' lives. But as far as our main source of energy, I think we would be far better off if we use nuclear energy for our power grids instead of renewables.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm not 100% anti-nuclear, honestly, either. I'm pretty in support of them in general, I would say. So I'm gonna go ahead and agree there. I mean, obviously there's limitations to that, but I do think that nuclear should be in the transitionary period at the very least. I mean, if you talk long term about getting rid of it, I'm willing to hear that out. But I think short term, we need basically everything we can use. So I mean, if eventually we don't
Geothermal would
need it,
also
sure,
be
get rid of it. But it seems like we may need it. I mean, I've seen scientists make the argument that we don't need it to transition. I definitely have seen one say it would make it certainly a lot easier. So, I say fuck it. Like it could have catastrophic consequences in theory,
ended up
but it.
starting the program, their nuclear program.
Mhm.
I don't remember how long ago it was, but they have substantially improved energy-wise and have used less resources due to switching to nuclear. One problem that
Mhm.
I had never really considered before is how much land is necessary to produce the same amount of energy as one nuclear plant.
Yeah.
Like you need 450 times as much land
Oh yeah.
with solar panels, for example. And so,
Yeah.
and not only that, like, I didn't think about the lifespan of these solar panels too. They're not biodegradable. Once their lifespan's up, what do we do with them?
Yeah.
Like we have fields full of these fucking things.
I mean, I think they can. I think there's probably some recycling extent, some what's it called? What's the other word? God, I'm blanking on it, but fuck it. Oh well. But yeah, I mean, solar has its limitations. I tend to like the concentrated solar variety because they seem to be able to squeeze more energy out of the land potential rather than just mounting it and leaving it. Obviously, they have to turn with the sun, so that's one aspect. But the
Right.
manufacture that goes into the solar panels as well is something to be considered. So it really depends on the lifespan of them, whether or not they can be reused and recycled and remapped for other things or, repaired in some respect. So, I mean, the technology gets better all the time. Certainly, they're getting a lot cheaper to produce. So economically, that's no longer the barrier to solar. It's more about using our resources efficiently. I really like the kind of sci-fi idea about putting a lunar kind of a lunar installation around the moon that would, pull in solar energy and then transfer it back to Earth. But there's a whole number of technologies that need to go into it that are barely in their infancy. So it's,
Right.
it's a leap,
Long
but
time
it is
for
something
anything
being
like that.
considered.
But that's something for the future.
I think electric is really interesting.
Mm.
But ultimately, like if you look at any renewable proposal, it's going to be like a really wide array of different things. It's like, water, air, solar, biofuels, and and nuclear, obviously. And so it's like 6 or 7 different things, and they each account for 10 to 20%. So no one thing can do it all, basically. So
Right.
that's probably the most challenging thing, because these other technologies, they're just kind of like self-starters, fossil fuel technologies. So, but you have a lot of savings as well. There's not as much upkeep, and there's not as much cleaning and dirt and filth that comes with a lot of the other older technologies. One of the things about electric cars is they don't need oil changes. I mean, there's a lot of things that get taken out of the electric car that now you just don't have to fuck with and worry about. And a lot of people don't consider all of the aspects of electric cars. But I also happen to think, and we're getting kind of off topic here, so this is the last thing I'll say on this, but I also kind of think that people need to get over this idea of one car, one person, because it just seems massively inefficient.
Sure.
And I like this idea of a zip car, where people, they borrow one car to get to work, and then someone else comes and picks it up and goes to wherever they need to go. And so you have one car doing the work for
not a car that you personally own. You
Mhm.
pay subscription or something to use them when
Yeah,
you need to.
exactly. And you basically offload
That's
all of the
interesting.
administrative costs and the registration costs and all that stuff onto a company, and then they just rent it out by the hour or whatever. I think that's very efficient
Right.
in the places where you
That's a
can do
really
it.
good idea.
So, so you said the things that you thought the government should do primarily. We got those 3 things down: parks, defense, protect our rights and laws. I'm sure you would go further than that with some things, but those are kind of your big 3, I guess.
Sure.
For me, defense is obviously important. That goes up there. I don't know if it would be my number 1. I think my number 1 would be, I mean, I think you could probably encapsulate it into one solid element, but ultimately, I think the government's primary reason for existence is welfare of its citizens. So that encapsulates a lot of things, and you may rank them differently depending on who you are. And if you're an educator, you may say education is the most important. If you're a healthcare professional, you may say it's healthcare, obviously. But in general, I think the very top of the list for me is that general model of the welfare state: healthcare, education, childcare, elderly care, etc. And I would like
One
to
thing where I
see.
actually differ from a lot of libertarians is I do support expanding our welfare programs.
Really?
I do.
Huh. That's fascinating. See, I mean, one of the things that I think a lot of newer libertarianism has had kind of a transformation where it used to be just like free market against all else. It's like a zero-sum
Right.
game. The more free market it is, the better it is. Now some of them are saying, well, maybe it's really
And
about,
generally speaking, that's the case, yes.
and maybe it's really about, can we reduce the amount of waste in these welfare systems to make them more simplified, like the Yang model of
Well, yeah, that's one thing.
eliminating
I think
100 different programs to have one big granddaddy program.
right. I think one issue is that we need to crack down. I would be all for expanding our welfare program so long as we crack down on them and ensure that they're doing their job properly. Because, like, one thing I always thought was very perplexing that I'd heard from a lot of conservatives, they would talk about how illegal immigrants were coming here and they were getting welfare. And it's like, I was thinking to myself, well, how would they be getting welfare? They're not even citizens.
Yeah.
They're right, though. They are getting welfare, but it's not because of the law. The law shouldn't allow that. It's because we're not watching these welfare companies well enough, or companies, organizations, whatever. We're not paying close enough attention to them. So I would say we crack down on them, make sure they're doing their job properly, and then we could expand what they're actually able to do. provide.
I'm kind of curious about that. I mean, I've let's see. Oh no, that's totally unrelated. But I've looked into the. Oh my god, shut up! I hate whenever things it says like, oh, disable your ad blocker. Or you
Oh
can't read
my
this page.
God, isn't
That
that the
shit is
fucking worst?
relentless, dude. It's coming back with a vengeance.
That just makes me want to like never go to your fucking website again.
Yeah. So I was under the impression that illegal immigrants, on the whole, they add more. I mean, both to the economy and to our taxes
Oh,
than
sure.
they
Honestly,
take.
I don't really care about
Yeah.
illegal immigration. I really don't.
Right. And I mean, I know a lot of libertarians are in favor of open borders. I don't know if you are.
Yeah, that's a really split issue.
Yeah.
With that,
It does seem
because
that way.
depending on how you look at it, like the main thing I hear from people who still want strong borders that are libertarian is that they see no point in creating this ideal libertarian government if anyone can come in undocumented, no one knows who's actually here and what's going on, right?
Right.
I understand the point of view. I just generally think that they're not causing nearly as much harm as people are making it out to be. I think they tend to be more good than harm as far as just adding to our society, man. I mean, they're coming here, they're working. Like, that was one thing that I really liked Rand Paul was talking about recently. I was watching him live stream, and he was taking questions from people.
Right.
And I guess the Republican Party has been making it more difficult for Mexicans to legally, temporarily come to the United States for work for however many months or whatever, right? And so there would be people who would just be like have a seasonal business, right? And they don't even know if they're going to have enough staff now because it's so much more difficult for these people to come and work here. So that was something I was really glad he was talking about changing and allowing them to actually come and work and expand the amount of time they're able to spend here doing that.
I mean, that's pretty good. I'm not familiar with that in particular. I think that I pulled up something here because I was trying to do some research on what's that?
I said I don't remember what the program is called.
Yeah, I'll have to look into it. I was I'm trying to remember the train of thought that I just had a second ago. See, I have ADD, so I need to write these things down whenever I think of them. But I decided I was just curious because I was trying to figure out how many immigrants were on welfare programs, based on the program. And I know that
would be very
I know for some of these programs, in order to get them, they have to basically steal what's it called, social security numbers, right? That's how some of them get them, is they use fake social security numbers to apply for them. So I don't know which ones in particular you have to do that for, because some things are not afforded to illegals and other things are. It just depends on, for instance, they can go to public schools. Obviously, there was a high profile Supreme Court case that said that schools couldn't ask for social security numbers to go. It looks like I'm looking at a USA Today. I don't know if this is
I wasn't even aware of that.
This is a report. And it looks like 51% percentage of households headed by immigrants and natives that use welfare. Okay, so this isn't even illegal immigrants, it's just immigrants, so that's annoying. But it doesn't look like there's any data rising to the top on this issue specifically. But I can tell you personally, the immigrant thing I don't really think about it very much, because in the U.S. we don't have the same immigration problem that you might find in Europe. It has led to genuine consequences in some cases.
Sure.
Where their governments are not prepared for the influx of people.
They have too small of amount of land, man. Like,
yeah.
We have a significantly larger country than they do.
Oh yeah. And
especially given the fact that they're right next to where we have all these fucking wars going on, like, that's going to lead to some troubles.
Yeah. That's kind of a conspiracy theory I've had. It's like, could it possibly have played into the U.S.'s plan to destabilize the U.S.? Because, I mean, there were several security experts who said, look, if you go in there and you do these actions, it is going to lead to blowback. It's going to completely destabilize this fucking region. You guys can't do this. Right. or in some cases they were like, that's okay, that betters our interests for it to be unstable. It drives oil prices up, and we can command a better price. That's one of the things that happens as a result. And sometimes I wonder, were they also thinking that this would fuck up Europe entirely and would lead to political instability there and the rise of right-wing governments there? Because that's what's happened. Maybe they couldn't have called it, but sometimes I wonder if that played into it, if it was like a power play against Europe.
Would you say it's been a rise of right-wing governments there?
Mm-hmm. What's that?
Would you say it's been a rise of right-wing governments there in Europe? You're saying?
Many parts of Europe, not all of them. A lot of them are just centrist, but like for instance, in Germany, what's her name? Merkel. In our political sphere, she'd probably be about, like a Democrat, just like a center, maybe center left, you could say. But, she's compared to other people that run for these positions and other past governments, maybe, certainly compared to Jeremy Corbyn, she's not nearly as left as Jeremy Corbyn. Even though and I don't think she's, obviously she doesn't represent the most left party there. I don't know what is the most left party in Germany, probably like an actual socialist party. But obviously in the UK, conservatives are completely in control of the UK, almost directly in result to the immigration issues that they're seeing there, or at least in part a result to the immigration issues you see there. But like I was going back to before, welfare definitely would be my number one. But obviously behind that you would have defense, police, firefighters, all that stuff kind of comes next to it. But I think welfare is kind of the key point of government. But obviously, in order to have a welfare state that is functioning, you first have to have law and order, and you first have to have some kind of social stability in the country, political stability in the country. I don't think you could just go to like Ethiopia and establish like a utopian kind of democratic society overnight, obviously. Because there's differences in different regions, but I think in the U.S. we largely have these things figured out. And for instance, if you were to establish a universal healthcare system, I don't see any reason why the U.S. couldn't manage that. A lot of people say it's not feasible. I totally think it could.
More manageable if we had done it a while ago. I think that, like for example, if we had just made our healthcare be state-run, I wouldn't support the system. But I think it would have been a lot more realistic, a lot easier to transition to if we had done this a while ago.
Well, that is the thing. Overall, I think a fully nationalized system is the best one. But everyone has, even Bernie and them, they all seem to have just caved on that a long time ago and said, "Oh, we're just going to do single payer. We'll keep the market private, but we'll have the government pay for it." And that's the best we can possibly do in America. They're fighting us hard enough on just doing that.
I know we definitely disagree on this issue.
Yeah. It would seem so, but I don't know. I definitely.
For the record, I absolutely do not like our current system.
Well, of course, absolutely. I don't think anyone likes our current system, but well, how would you handle it? How do you think we could cover everybody for less?
Things in mind I would like to see done. I would like to maintain a private system. I would, however, want to abolish insurance. I would require hospitals to have price charts that show exactly how much they paid for everything that they're using and everything that you're receiving, so that you see the actual cost of what it was and how much they're charging you. And if there's a huge difference there, of course, this doesn't work for everything, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's a situation where you're incapacitated, you have no choice where you're being taken to, right? Then it doesn't matter. You can't decide where to go, right? But I think that would help for a lot of things. Mm-hmm. I would also, I don't know if I would entirely abolish this or if I would just seriously investigate all of these cases as far as patents go, because that's a big problem with like the cost of medicine. Like insulin, for example, a patent is only supposed to last so many years, right? But what they do is that they've been getting around it for like 90 years or something like this.
Patents
they've been getting around it because they'll just make tiny minuscule adjustments right? So then they can renew their patent, and they just keep doing that every time. And so no one's able to make generic alternatives to a lot of these drugs. And I think if we allowed the free market to actually work with this, that would help a lot more. Because I think a big problem with a lot of this is that we currently have a system where the government and these private industries and all these middlemen are all trying to make a profit out of the same thing that's being done, right? Like one individual thing. They're all trying to make their own piece of that pie from that. And so that ends up you have prices super inflated, way more than what we should be paying for these products. So I think because just think back, like the 50s and shit. We hardly anyone used insurance for anything they had done healthcare wise. Because they didn't have to. It was cheap enough. So and there's probably some other things that we would need to do. I don't know that would be enough to fix this clusterfuck we've created.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely don't think so, personally. But God,
I think that would do a lot.
Here's let's see, let me try to unpack this. So, I think the issue with that is that even if let's assume that banning insurance brought prices down, right? And I don't even know if that's true. It may be true, but let's assume that happens, right? There will still always be a certain amount of people who can't afford it, and so the ethical question is raised: what do we do with them?
That's another thing I forgot to mention. I would definitely, anyone who isn't able to afford whatever healthcare they require, absolutely have that be covered by the government, but only for the people who cannot afford it, right? I think we'd be saving a lot of money if we exclusively gave it to those people. I wouldn't want the government funding care if they're perfectly capable of paying for it on their own. The problem is right now it's very difficult for a lot of people to pay for things on their own because of the way the system currently is.
That's true. Well, I think the issue with private healthcare also is that there's so many separate costs to healthcare being private that kind of pad the price, whether there's a insurer or not. I think, for example, it's strange, but in the U.S. you see hospitals advertising themselves, and it's like, why? Why do they? When you need a hospital, you'll be there. Like they don't need to. Drug companies don't need to advertise drugs. Drugs should only be used when they're needed. It shouldn't be like, you might have this thing and we have the cure for it. You should just go to a doctor, and the doctor looks at what's wrong with you and says, okay, well, you need this, this, and this. So, there's costs such as that. And also, if you eliminate the insurers, like you say, you'll eliminate the paperwork problem, perhaps. I
agree with you there as far as the advertising stuff goes. Just because I think there is probably some instances where somebody would have no interest in going to the doctor. They know they have a problem, but they don't think there's anything that can really be done. And then maybe they'll see an advertisement for something and they'll be like, you know what, that actually might really help me out. Maybe I should go talk to my doctor about this.
Maybe.
God damn,
I don't know if someone needs a Viagra commercial to know that their dick isn't functioning right. But
yeah,
maybe some situations like where you're just like you have brain fog all the time, and they're like, hey, do you experience brain fog all the time? And you're like, oh, you know what, I kind of do. But there could be a million different reasons for that. I don't know. I guess the main issue that I have is that I look at efficiency, and from one perspective, there's the principle of I have a fundamental mistrust in powerful entities such as corporations, such as the government, and I kind of do this mathematics game of like, okay, well, which one is the bigger danger to me? And I have noticed that, well, obviously the government doesn't care if I have privacy. It's spying on me all the time. It doesn't care about people outside this country because it's bombing them all the time. But then the corporations don't care if I can afford to live or die or not when it comes to healthcare. So, they both have their faults. But I generally look around the world and I look at the countries that seem to have the best coverage in terms of the people who want healthcare can get it. And I overwhelmingly see that those tend to be countries with what's called large risk pools. So you have either 80% or 100% of the country all subscribe to the same risk pool, where they pay in a certain amount of their the money they get from their labor, and then everyone's covered for whatever basic services that they need, anything that will save their life, prevent an illness, cure an illness, etc. It's all covered. And so because we have this massive risk pool, one person may only need $10 from the pool, one other person may end up needing 100,000. And since there's such a large pool, it really doesn't matter what any individual person needs. It's a rich country, and that pool is going to take care of us. You know what I mean? So, and the risks basically get balanced out over everyone, instead of, some people just get naturally super lucky and they may only need like $1,000 in health treatment over their life. Whereas another, because, they don't go to the doctor for their entire life and then they get hit by a bus when they're like 70, right? Whereas someone else may need, they have a serious illness they were born with and they can't do anything about. And so they need in-hospital care, 2 weeks out of the year for the rest of their life, and that person is just saddled with this responsibility of paying tens of thousands of dollars their entire life, whereas and they were just born into that situation. And that's kind of, to me, that's fucked. I like the idea of having a massive risk pool that we all are entitled to. And healthcare is one of those things that it's hard, in my mind, the reason I see it as a win-win in terms of the government covering it, in my mind, it's hard to abuse. It's hard for someone to just go to a doctor and be like, yo, I want an extra lung. So is something wrong with my lung? Nah, but I want to do it anyway. Now you got to pay for it. Like, it's hard for them to abuse and take shit from the government because it's just health services. It's just, it's medicine. Like, right. A doctor has to first clear them and say they need this medicine and write a script for it before they get it. You know what I mean? So, and to be clear, some countries that have universal health care, they still make you pay for prescriptions. Canada's like this. You still have to pay for prescriptions. They're cheaper. But, how about this? Well, would you support the government manufacturing a general version of every prescription? Like an unpatented general version of each prescription? That way there's a cheap version of it always available?
No.
Not at all?
Absolutely not.
Why?
No. I don't want the government making my drugs, man.
Well, I mean, it seems like other countries have done it, and
this is why, actually, here's another very controversial topic. In a similar vein, mandatory vaccination, I am entirely opposed to. I think we should get vaccinated voluntarily. I think we should have. I'm a big believer in vaccinations. We need to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Right? I would never in a million years allow or promote or accept a policy where the government makes it mandatory for you to get vaccinated, because we have seen in more than one instance, but the most primary instance that comes to mind is the Tuskegee experiments, where for 40 years or something like this, they were going and giving these poor black people, right, telling them they were being vaccinated, and instead they were injecting them with fucking syphilis. And they didn't tell them. They were doing experiments on them. And they ended up doing the exact same thing over in Guatemala. Our government did.
When did this happen? I've heard about this in
Hillary
passing.
Clinton wasn't involved in this, but she actually apologized for this a couple of years ago.
1932 to 1972.
Yes.
Jesus Christ. Receiving free healthcare from the United States government. Oh my God. 600. Jesus. Yeah, that's pretty fucked. It looks like. I'm not 100%. I'm not going to sign on to it 100%, but this does appear to be fucked. I will look into it afterwards, though. It's interesting.
You definitely should. That was one of the most fucked up things I've ever seen, man.
Yeah, and I mean, to be clear, whenever I talk about ideas for how the government could be improved and improve all of our lives, probably at the outset, the most important part of the government is that it should be completely accountable and transparent. And so that's why I don't support things like the NSA. I don't support, honestly, I don't even know if I support basic things like the CIA, the FBI. These things need to be seriously scaled back.
Hey, man.
Yeah,
But
and these things need to come into the, there's some things like, yeah, the nuclear codes. That's a classic example everyone brings up. That can't be public, whatever. Like, I get it, but
sure.
generally speaking, I'd say 95% of the government, you should be able to just go online and look up the exact document for every single transaction that takes place.
That's another thing I really hate is how they fucking write these bills. They make it to where no one is gonna want to read this shit.
Intentionally difficult to read. Yeah, Obamacare. How many pages was that? Like hundreds, maybe 1,000 or
Too
something
much.
like that. It definitely too much.
It was
But
too much.
I don't know. I mean, and let's see, where were we going with this anyway? Oh, healthcare, right? So I think if the government's
Yeah,
going
you're
to if
discussing
the government's
government
going to
creating
create
generic
general
drugs.
prescriptions to compete with private prescriptions, and I think you could also maybe tackle this by just, like you said, altering patent law, which is absolutely ridiculous. I think
Right.
it should go for no more than, I mean, 20 years max, but I mean, probably much
It's not
shorter
even
than that.
supposed to go that long most of the time.
Really?
The problem is
Yeah,
they
I mean,
abuse the system.
maybe 10, maybe 5 years. Like, honestly, I don't
Yeah, it's
don't
like
even
5 to 10 years for most patents.
I haven't looked deeply into that, but I don't know that there's a genuine argument that patents act as an incentive that drives investment necessarily. I think it can be done
I
without
think
that.
I
I
think
may
it
be wrong.
helps. They're good for the first couple years because then if there's somebody that's a small business owner comes up with
Hmm.
something really cool, right? Obviously, if a big business could just rip them off right away, that's no good for them, right? That's terrible for small business. But
Yeah.
if you allow patents, because it's not just them, it's not just small businesses that are going to be creating patents, right? If you allow these big businesses to abuse that system, then it's just completely eliminating any competition in the free market, and that's not good for anyone.
Oh yeah. I mean, the extent to which.
Actually, why? Where, where you feel that the corporations are the bigger threat
Hmm.
than the government, I disagree. I think corporations are definitely a big threat, right? I think generally speaking, they're less of a threat. I think the main problem with corporations is when they monopolize, right? And I
Uh-huh.
think government is the biggest, strongest monopoly that you could possibly have.
Yeah, I don't know if I totally buy that, to be honest. Well,
What's that?
maybe, but I mean, here's the thing. In theory,
Right.
the government should be a monopoly in that it represents all of us. So it makes sense for it to be a monopoly. It's supposed to represent the
Problem is,
democratic
doesn't.
majority opinion, what the people generally want. And I'm a huge populist, so I want the government to resemble that. I want it to be a monopoly for the people, if you will, a giant union, if you will, for the people. So we all unionize
If I
healthcare.
trusted the government to do that,
Uh-huh.
then that would be a very different story.
Right. And I guess this is where we get into incentive issues, but
Right.
let's see.
Give me
I don't know.
one
We're kind
moment.
of.
I'll be right back.
Oh, sure, sure. Let me see if I can gather my thoughts while he's gone here. Jesus Christ. I'm looking at my notes over here. I'm trying to. I have such ADD. I'm trying to keep this all in perspective. Okay. I think we should just move on from this one. The role of government is such a broad subject. It's really hard to get everything in perspective without a fuckload of preset notes. Ay ay ay. Wonder if there's a page on that. I totally. Why did I do that? There we go. Oh, what's up? Oh, okay, cool. Got a new tractor. Woo. Oh, federal government of the United States. Check that out. Yeah, sorry guys. Next time I am definitely going to split the videos down the middle because I honestly don't know what to do with my fucking desktop, and this is just wasted space. I get that.
All right.
Yo, yo.
Yo.
Yeah, next time I'm definitely going to just split our videos down the center because I'm so ADD, it's hard for me to browse on on my PC and just go to different issues and bring up information while talking at the same time. I have to be hyper focused on the conversation. Otherwise, I just my brain is suddenly like, "Oh, look, a cat," and it just goes off, and then I've forgotten everything that I wanted to talk about. So, we shall explore the role of government in a different one, because this is a tough topic. The role of government really is a tough topic, and I'm sure we'll get back into it. But let's see. Well, okay. Before I finish off here, let me just give some thoughts on the, where is the threat, government or the private sector? And personally, for me, this all comes down to historical precedent, and I am not prefacing, I am not an expert on history. I actually plan to have someone on who is currently chasing a graduate degree on history to talk about these things, because he's also fascinating. A friend of mine, I think a mutual friend of ours, Mike, and so I'm not an expert on history, but based on the history that I have spent a lot of time researching, and it is a lot of time. I don't want to make myself seem like a complete layman, but based on the history, it would appear that the private market is highly destructive in the hands of humans. Humans are horrible at making economic decisions. They're horrible at investing their money. And
I definitely don't believe the free market can fix all of our fucking problems.
Yes, and there's
certain things, like a very great example, I think, that I try to point to often is that, like, for example, the source of the labor for some of these companies, like using sweatshops and stuff, that's not something that the invisible hand of the free market is really going to have much of an effect on, because people either don't know that they're doing that, or they do know and just don't care. Because it has nothing to do with the product that they're receiving.
And that's kind of, the great experiment of the global capitalist market has been just seeing how this plays out. And unfortunately, it appears to me, to be a just in general race to the bottom across the world, where corporations, they try to move as much labor as they can to the cheapest locations, and then whenever automation becomes cheaper, they just automate them out. And I mean, regardless of what we do with the free market, automation is coming for all of us. So we have to find a way around this. I think these UBI, universal basic income proposals, seem to be the general way out that I would take, is offsetting all of the gains onto the public from that automation. And that's how I would address it, because those jobs just aren't coming out. What's that?
I think we need to restrict automation.
Why?
Here's my issue.
I don't know if we can let that genie back in the bottle,
That's something that I generally don't like the government fucking around a lot with the market. That's one thing where I do want them to fuck with the market.
Really?
Restrict the hell out of automation.
You have some interesting, bizarre positions, because, like, for instance, you say, you trust the government with the role of banning private insurance, but you don't trust them to divvy out healthcare insurance to everybody, which is fascinating. And you don't trust the government meddling in the marketplace generally, but you do trust them stopping automation.
Not entirely stopping it, but putting
limits on automation.
I would require that every business have a certain percentage of their labor come from a human. My problem is, a lot of people have pointed to the idea of someday having universal basic income for everyone, and then having machines do the bulk of our labor, right? My problem with this is, who's running the machines? Is it even a person? Is it AI? Is AI running the machines? In which case, I definitely don't fucking trust them. If it's a person, who are the people? Who elects them? Who knows how to run these machines? Are they the only ones who know how to run them? How easily can they be hacked? I think the shitty part about this is that the most control we have is with our labor. I think we need to work. Otherwise, we have no control over what happens to us. If we left all of this in the hands of someone else, and we no longer had any idea how to do these things for ourselves, it was the machines doing all of this for us, we'd be castrating ourselves.
Right.
So that terrifies me. That sort of
That's
idea of a
interesting.
future terrifies me. So
You
I
know,
want to avoid that at all costs.
you may find this bizarre, but I've heard similar sentiments from genuine socialists, and I do consider myself. I often describe myself as socialist friendly. I think that socialism is kind of the check on capitalism, and I question honestly to what extent humans are capable of fulfilling a totally socialist society. I think the USSR and things like that was a learning experiment, but I do understand the arguments that keep it real. When you look at the USSR, many variants of socialism, and socialists at the time directly broke with Lenin on the things that he did. For instance, he disbanded democratic labor boards. Labor was never in control of the means of production, which is kind of a core tenet of socialism. So really,
Right.
it divides down the middle of kind of a big government form of socialism, a central authoritarian socialism, and also a market socialism. I tend to consider myself much more a market socialist, where we have like democratic co-ops, but we still have a private market of goods to some extent. I like those kind of ideas. But
I don't think we could have socialism that wasn't totalitarian without a benevolent society.
yeah, that gets into the discussion of human nature, but I don't know nearly enough about a
We don't need to get into that right now, man.
Yeah, I'm no expert, and I'm not gonna sit here and try to pretend I know what human nature is. So that's a very difficult discussion to be had. Maybe I could have someone who's more experienced on to haven't. Well, I'm gonna be researching that myself because I'm really curious. But looking at automation, though, I've always just kind of assumed it's just gonna happen, and there's nothing we can really do about it, because the march of technology appears to be unstoppable. I mean, the just thirst for technology
Well, of course,
of people.
technology will exist. That's no
Yeah.
question. My question is, where should we allow it to be applied and used?
Yeah. And looking at some data here, the risk profile, share of tasks that could be automated with current technologies. For men,
the big thing that's going to happen is the trucking industry. That'll
yeah,
be gone.
Definitely. Transportation in general, that appears to be unstoppable. So age 16 to 24, 49% of their jobs could be automated,
of the
according to
population.
this. And that makes sense because 16 to 24-year-olds tend to be overwhelmingly in service industry jobs where there's little mental power and effort going into it. So I don't know. See, okay, here's my perspective on automation. I think that, like I said, I think it's probably going to happen, and there's little we can do. I mean, I think a very large chunk of it is gonna, even the things that you might say, like self-driving cars.
Right.
I tend to buy into just most of it. Most of the stuff that you may not agree with, but how I couch it though is that we need to make large-scale investments in education and the public sector in terms of UBI, so that people. This is going to sound crazy, but people don't necessarily need to work. And that's where I break with socialists, because socialists may agree with you that work is what gives us purpose. So everyone kind of needs to work. There's just a point to people
It's
working.
less about purpose, more about power.
Okay, I could see that. And I don't necessarily think everyone needs to work, and so I kind of buy into that. But I think that everyone should have access to attempting to climb the higher ladders of work, get into the sciences, the arts, things like that. And we should give people high access to those things through schooling. Some people say college is going away. My good friend, the anarchist, says that, maybe universal college isn't a good way to go because not everyone needs to go to college. But, like, for instance, not to preface too much because we're about to talk about education, but like Larry Sharp, when he says, well, it's perfectly fine for some people to go to trade school. I think most jobs that trade schools result in are going to get automated. So I think that's like kind of a bad idea to be.
I think a lot of them are going to take longer than people think.
Maybe. You might be right there.
But because there's some things that are just, it's very variable stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like depending on the situation, like if you're a plumber or something, it's
Right.
not as simple as like just having a machine in a shop.
A robot can just come out to your house and unclog the toilet.
And everything, this is something that will last longer than people think. But those jobs certainly will be the first to be automated.
You may be right. You may be right to some extent. And I guess we should probably move on to the next topic because we've spent way too much time on this.
All right.
And we'll just move right into, yeah, we talked about Bernie's, on this show, we talked about Bernie's education plan the other day, and I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. The Thurgood Marshall Plan for Public Education. And Brian here sent me a plan by someone named Larry Sharp. Is that his name? He ran for governor in New York, right?
Yeah.
Am I getting that right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I just put some bullet points down of some things that he had recommended for fixing education, and I want to just run through these. So first of all, the main one that I think we both agree on, and Bernie, I think, agrees on because he put some deep language on that in this proposal that he made. But standardized tests are fucked, and they need to go away. And Larry Sharp says get rid of standardized tests at least till high school. I don't even know if they're necessary in high school, personally. Like, they're just
I don't know if they are either, but
yeah,
as long as they're at least mostly eliminated, I'd be a lot happier.
As I understand, I think it was Finland that got rid of standardized tests altogether, and they've shot up and are now, on some years, they've been the best rated education system. Now, of course, those are highly weighted. It's difficult to say which education system is better. There's like a million different fucking metrics that these people go by. Is it like graduation rate? Is it literacy on a given subject? But
it's the same problem with the standardized test.
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to standardize how you judge education. So it's hard. I think you can get a broad, like, general idea, but generally when you look at these metrics, those areas, the Nordic model appears to do very well. And what you tend to see there, and in some of these, they also, you're not going to like this, but I mean, some of them they do, I think it's Norway, they just outright ban private schools. Just outright, there was at least one of them I know that just outright bans private school up to college.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah, and they still seem to do really well. But of course, easy enough for them. Those are homogenous society. But what I mean by that is that they're very close knit societies. They're there's not a wide gap between rural and city. I mean, in some cases there are, but it's not as
that's another thing is. And I think he might have brought this up in the video, so maybe you wrote this down. I think he wanted to not have the schools funded by property taxes like it is everywhere.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's one of the main problems that Bernie's proposal keeps talking about is the fact that the wealth exhibited in these schools is highly dependent on the location. It's highly dependent on is that district rich or is it not?
That makes a big difference.
And also the scores. I think it was the Bush administration that instituted, to some extent, the amount of money they receive is based on their performance in standardized tests. So it kind of incentivizes like pre-existing intellect. Like if a school's not doing well, well then, fuck them, make it even harder for them to do well, which is totally insane. And that's one of the things Larry Sharp brings up that I did agree with. He talks about eliminating Common Core. I think I generally agree with that. On that one, I'm not sure. I'd have to look at studies on that, whether Common Core had a benefit or not. But my gut says Common Core is probably useless. He says to do K through 10 rather than K through 12. This is a fascinating one. I could see this, and the reason he sells this is that, okay, well, at 10th grade, that's where you kind of branch off, and some people, they go to work. At 16, you can work. Some people, they go to a trade school and get, licensed to become a plumber or whatever. And then some people, they go to a prep school, and then they eventually go on to college. And they're preparing for college.
Or just go straight to college.
Yeah, or just go straight to college. Yeah, if you're like just a super really smart guy. And at the end he says, or get a job at 16. I think that's irresponsible.
College. I don't know if I'd call myself a very smart guy.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I think just ending school and getting a job at 16 is probably a bad idea. I mean, he says, some people, sure, they can do it, but that does kind of, it puts you behind other people in a very serious way. I mean, if we had like universal basic income, I could see that working, right? But in the existing system where at 16, there is absolutely no way without an education you can get a living job. I mean, it's just it's almost, unless you live with like 3 or 4 other people. I guess there's no shame with that, but
Well, at the
it
time that you're
severely hampers
16,
you.
at
What's
the
that?
time that you're 16, you're probably still getting assistance
Yeah.
from your parents.
Yeah, to some extent, but I mean, if
Depends on the
those are the
person also with
crucial
that.
years, like before you're 25, those crucial years are where your brain is still developing, and I think most people should be doing some kind of education at that point. I mean, even if, I don't know, that's why I tend to
Well,
support
I think it
the,
should be voluntary because that was another
yeah,
thing you brought up. When people actually want to be there, it is a
yeah,
lot better. It's a much better
for sure.
environment.
For sure. And I mean, that's why a universal college proposal it also doesn't necessarily mean everyone goes to college. It means everyone who applies and gets in, and a lot of schools are very easy to get into, but
And there
generally
was
if
something
you
I
want
actually
to go
wanted
to
to bring
college,
up
you
on
can
college.
go. And also it applies to trade schools and to colleges that are not necessarily the 4-year, I'm going to get a very serious job route. It also applies to those. Like if you don't qualify or you just don't want to, you can go to trade schools as well. Most of the proposals I've seen include that. And I would just like to see a system in which, and this gets to the next point he makes, which is that, and this is a very non-libertarian point, but I really like that he made it. The idea, I guess because it lowers the amount of money we spend, the idea that when you're 16, at this point where you're making this decision to either go to work or go to trade school, go to this, that, you get $20,000 from the government, and then you can put that towards starting a prep school or a trade school or going to college. Obviously, my problem with this is that will come nowhere near to covering college, and he would probably say, well, under this plan, the people that want to go to college will ultimately be able to get that money. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure personally, but
Right.
I don't know. I think that if the government were to invest in universal college, I think and most of the proposals I've seen seem to indicate that it would bring the cost of college down, and also it's just very cheap in the scope of our
Now, my
government.
question with the
Mhm.
universal plan
Yeah,
for college
right.
is that what is that for? Does that apply to all universities or
Trade
only
schools and
specific?
universities. Yeah, public
Just all
universities.
universities.
Public universities. It doesn't include private universities. So I
Okay.
think, is Harvard
Because here's
private?
my main issue with our
Hmm.
college system and why, because
Yeah.
it's definitely way too fucking expensive. I think we
Oh
can all
yeah,
agree with
for
that.
sure, for
It's
sure.
way too expensive. I think a big reason for that is because of government getting involved with colleges. I think
Hmm.
that one of the biggest problems we've had is that the government decided to tell the banks they would back student loans. And so
Hmm.
because of that, the banks were no longer discriminating. Even if they thought there was no chance in hell you were going to be able to pay off that loan. Didn't matter. They'll give it to you anyway because the government is going to cover that. And so then what happens? All these people are in massive amounts of debt,
Hmm.
and the schools know the people that can't even afford it are going to be coming anyway. They're already paying more than they can. They're going to just jack up the prices. It doesn't matter. The government's covering it. They know they're going to get their money. So they can keep jacking up the prices of tuition.
Yeah.
And so I think a thing that would help a lot is if we stopped the government backing student loans and then required that their tuition, uh,
Hmm.
it would the amount of people enrolling at these schools would drop significantly. People wouldn't be able to afford it anymore,
Yeah.
right? So then, what are they going to do? They're going to have to lower their tuition, otherwise, no one's going to come to the fucking school anymore. I think that would
Hmm.
help out a lot.
I don't know that would happen, honestly, personally, but
Really,
because I
you don't
mean,
think they would have to lower their tuition?
mm, maybe. I mean, we also, I think honestly, what's driving in general, what's driving the upward trend in cost is that a lot of really wealthy families can afford college, whereas poor people can't afford college. So, for example, let's
But do
say
you
you
think there's
have,
enough of them?
what's that?
Do you think there's enough of the wealthier families to cover what the college needs to stay open?
Hmm, probably, but
Really?
Honestly, I think it
I don't know.
it
I guess
functions
I
similarly.
disagree there.
I think it functions similar because whenever you look at public universities, they tend to be a lot cheaper than private universities. I know this because I
Sure.
went to Rochester Institute of Technology for a while, and it was outlandishly expensive. It was probably, I don't know,
Yeah, sure.
$45,000 a
A
year
lot
on
of private
average.
universities are super expensive.
Yeah, whereas University of Houston is, I don't know, half that or a little over half that. And, that's a large school. That's a pretty good school, honestly. And I think probably the main way that we could address this is, like I said, universal college tuition, and it would, similar to universal health care, it would create a large pool of people that are going to school who basically can lobby for a cheaper price. And the government would, in that situation, they would probably have I think they would be able to set reasonable price controls and then it actually apply and still have a relatively decent education because most of that money would come out of the upper end, the administration end. I mean, it would have to because obviously teachers, and also similarly in the Bernie plan, he mandates teacher pay at a minimum of $60,000 in public schools. So if you were to do something similar with public colleges, that could be looked at. But I guess the problem with public colleges is that oftentimes they're more accountable to states rather than the federal system. They're more accountable to, the University of Houston is more accountable to the
Right.
city and state because
Dude.
a lot of their money, like we talk about, it comes from more localized tax systems, more state and property, etc. Whereas it doesn't come from like a direct risk pool like the federal government, for example. And I think the more
Right.
nationalized you have something where the risk pool is at a national level, the better off it tends to be. And that's why these countries like Germany that have national federal programs for higher education, they tend to do all right. I mean, in terms of, how they're rated, and like we said, rating these things, it is highly subjective, but they do very well. And it seems also, the other thing is that it seems to pay off in the long run. People tend to get better jobs and they tend to get better pay in the long run. So it seems like a good investment in the general economy. And probably the main reason why I support universal college versus like Andrew Yang, he doesn't want to do that. He wants to have some kind of financing structure.
Oh,
You
really?
pay 10. Yeah, he talks about doing a 10% of your income for 10 years back to the university. So if you make 200K a year, that's going to be
Oh,
200K. If you make 20K a year, that's going to be 20K. So it's based on and that's kind of cool
that's
because it's
very
based on
interesting.
how effective you are and what money you make. But at the
Right.
same time, the way I justify the government one is because I just look at the cost estimates and they're really really low. The Bernie plan to just
Yeah, and another,
do
I guess, a problem with that Yang policy
uh-huh.
is that, I mean, the school is still the people there are
Mhm.
still working to do their job and everything,
Yeah.
right? Like the
Yeah.
school obviously needs to be compensated,
Right.
and if
Yeah.
it's just entirely dependent on whether or not you get a job
If you
afterwards,
don't get a job at all, yeah, they
right?
don't make shit back.
Like they
But
might be fucked. Like even if
yeah.
they did a great job, they might still be fucked.
Yeah, I'm guessing it follows you around for 10 years. I mean, everyone needs a job I mean, unless they're totally able to live dependent off their parents, that's one thing, but everyone needs a job. So, I mean, even if they go to McDonald's, they're going to be taking that 10%. But
Right.
the reason I kind of see that as shitty is because, and Yang, it's weird because his argument is that not everyone is going to ultimately get a job. And so I'm thinking, like, okay, well, if you've already bought into that premise, then so you want someone to go to college and not be able to get a job from that. Because I have friends who went to like ITT Tech and they got totally ripped off. Their college did not give them the necessary information in order to get the jobs in the field they were trying to get in, like, AutoCAD, for instance, and architecture. And so they can't even get jobs despite having a degree from that school. And now they have to pay off loans for shit that literally did nothing. And so under Yang's plan, you could theoretically go to school and then get a job in something that's totally unrelated. It didn't end up benefiting you whatsoever. And now you're paying 10% of your income when, I mean, otherwise you would have just got the job and not paid anything. And it's like,
Right.
like McDonald's, for example. So I don't know. There's problems with that.
And you could also abuse that though, because like, let's say you graduated, right? And you're just like, I don't feel like paying that much money for my education. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna get a low-paying job for that many years and then do what I actually intended on doing.
Yeah. Although I don't know if that would matter
I
because
don't think that
it
would
is
happen.
just a percentage of your income. So I mean, it's always better to
What,
make
like,
more
is it a
money
percentage of your income, like, for the rest of your life?
for just 10 years. Yeah. He calls it the
Yeah,
10
right,
by
for 10
10
years.
plan.
I mean, yeah, 10 years would be a long time to
Yeah.
put off doing
Seriously.
what you wanna do. So I
Yeah.
guess that probably wouldn't happen very often.
The only cool thing about it is that if you do end up getting a decent job, ultimately it is a lot cheaper. Like the average U.S. job is like 45K, or if we look at the median, it's like probably 40,000, something like that. So over 10 years, that's 40 grand, right? And I mean, that's very cheap for an education by today's standards. But I don't know. And I mean, again, that would have to solve because they would obviously make less money than they currently are making. Because even if you look at the average U.S. uh, if you just look at the average, which includes like super rich fucking people, and so the average is way skewed upward, it's still only like what 65K or 62K or something like that. So it would still on average in this country be 60K for an education, which is lower than it is now. So you would expect them to have
Right.
a shortfall. I don't know, but maybe it would also bring costs down. Who knows? He probably has other things in his plan that seek to address that. But bottom line for me, though, is that the estimates that I look for at Bernie's plan specifically, which taxes, it puts like I think a 1% tax on Wall Street speculation or something, and it covers free college for everyone who wants it and qualifies, and includes trade schools, I believe. And the total cost of it, estimates range depending on whether you look at liberal or Republican sources or right wing sources. It ranges
Right.
from about 40 billion a year to 65 billion a year, which to me, for college for everyone in the country, that's like a drop in the bucket. That's less than 10% of our. I think that's probably about 5%, maybe a little less than 5% of our total national budget. Well, I mean, if you include, if you just look at discretionary spending, it's like what 4 or 5% of our budget. So that's very, very little, and that's generally why I support that. Is because it seems really cheap for something that is such a large investment in our economy. Um,
That's
you
that
know,
percentage of a budget that I believe should be significantly smaller.
right, yeah. Well, I mean, in the U.S., we have, for in some cases, for the corporate tax, for instance, we have one of the highest percentages in the developed world, supposedly, but it ultimately ends up being one of the lowest effective rates because they end up
Right,
paying almost
sure.
fucking nothing because
Well,
of all
that's
the
what happens
loopholes.
when you try to tax the fuck out
Yeah.
of rich people a lot of the time
And
because they have
middle
money.
class
They have
people
means to
and
get around
middle and upper middle class people, they pay a good 20-25% or so of their income, maybe a little bit more in some cases. And in those cases, they're actually working and they're contributing to the economy, whereas if you're doing like capital gains, that caps out at what 15%. So there's some fuckery in our tax system, but ultimately I think what the amount of taxes that are currently collected is probably about what we would need to do a lot of the programs that I want to do. Maybe a little bit more. And I would say if it does take a little bit more, let's offload that on corporate interests and the wealthy. And, you know, let's see, how far am I willing to get outside this general discussion we're having? Because I'm already pretty outside the bounds on it.
right, man.
I don't know. How do you feel about the wealthy? Like, I personally, I would be cool with the government
I would
literally
love
setting
to
a
answer
cap
this
on wealth.
after I take a leak again.
Okay, you do that. That's what happens when you drink
God damn
liquids.
beer, man.
Cool. Gives me time to collect my thoughts because we are all over the place. I apologize, guys. Never done this before. Oy. Let's see here. Our next topic is going to be free speech. Free speech. Who the fuck was that, dude? Who the fuck was that? I have no idea. Yeah. Okay, we should probably do free speech next.
Thanks, man.
We're not going to disagree much on the Big Brother thing.
What's that?
Oh, nothing. What did I ask you before you left? Oh, how do you feel about wealthy people?
How I feel about the wealthy?
Yeah.
I think
Because
a lot of them are scumbags.
What?
I said I think a lot of them are scumbags.
Uh-huh.
I think generally speaking, if you're a successful businessman, you probably had to do some fuckery to get there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm really happy to hear that we agree on that one.
But where I know we disagree, one of my fundamental problems with Bernie Sanders is his whole idea is because, obviously the things that he's proposing, unless you just completely redistribute, reallocate where our taxes are spent and don't bump up taxes whatsoever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you would need his whole thing, right, is we don't need to worry about taxes for the rest of us going up. It'll just be the upper 1% it'll go up on. Right. My problem with this is if you do that and it's actually enforced properly, these people will just leave. They're the one people that would have
heard this before. I've heard this before.
Going somewhere.
I don't know that it's true. If I'm honest with you, I mean, I've looked into this. I've tried to look into this.
Think about like the Swiss banks everybody puts their money into, all these rich fucks, right? It's because it's a better deal for them, and they can do it.
Yeah,
because they've got enough money.
Hold on, I'm trying to put your camera right next to me because I've been doing this really stupid thing this whole time that is really dumb, and I would much rather you just be side by side on me here. Let's see here. Oops. No. Oh, that's one of my big gripes with OBS is you cannot undo. They need to add that feature, seriously. You move over the camera and you fuck something up and now you have to reposition it completely.
And you can't go back to how it was, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. There should just be, you should be able to just Control Z that shit.
Yeah, dude.
Okay, move this over. All right, move you over.
I don't know anything about that program, but fuck it.
Okay. I'm trying to position you right in the middle here. And then we will go on. Luckily, I can edit all this out. This is how we're going to do it in the future in general because it's just much better this way. The only problem is that you are... Is there any way you can adjust your camera so that you're more in the center a little bit?
Oh, more in the center of my camera.
Because you're like all the way to the left and you're not even the left one.
Oh God, let's see here.
Okay, this is how it's going to be more in the future because this is much better. All right.
Is that all right? Is that good?
Yeah, we'll call that okay. Yeah, that's
about
fine.
As center as I can get.
Yeah, that's fine. I can live with that. But ooh, shit. There we go. Oh, that's okay. Add filter. What the fuck is it, dude? I hate doing this shit in the middle of it, but I'm so new to all these things. I swear one day we will have this all figured out.
Someday.
Fuck off, dude.
Soon.
And there's someone driving a goddamn tractor around outside my door, and it's really distracting. It's been happening all for the last hour. Yeah, that's the beauty of this directional microphone. Add.
I need to get a new mic.
Yeah. Oh, this microphone's badass, but it's way too long. It looks like a big dick in my face. That's the problem with all microphones, though.
This one, I don't know what the fuck this looks like.
So, this stream was basically a big ass experiment, but that's not bad. That's fine.
Yeah, man.
You gotta learn somehow, man.
This is your first run with a live streaming with a guest, man.
Yeah. I mean, you know me. I used to do mostly scripted content,
Oh, dude, all
and
my shit is, man.
I'm gonna go
Even
back
when
to
I did
that to an
that half
extent.
hour long show, the entire thing was fucking scripted.
There we go.
God, that was
Whoa.
awesome. That was too much work.
Okay, I got you. I think we are. This will be much better. It's much less confusing because before, like 90% of the screen was not even being used for anything important, and now I can actually look at the camera. I I don't know what I was thinking about. I'm way too ADD to try to be trying to browse the internet and have a really deep conversation at the same time. I should be wearing my shades too, but they're just well, those aren't even shades, but I broke my normal
Yeah, they're
glasses.
not gonna shade anything.
Yeah. So, what we were talking about before. Okay, the wealthy. So,
Right.
this is how I view it. I see, and I don't think anyone can dispute that this planet is a closed system, right? And there is only so many resources to go around. So fundamentally, we all agree that there is an endless debate on how to divvy up these resources. And I think that capitalism does a really good job at putting a lot of resources in the hands of very few people, and it seems to naturally do that. Now, this is one of those things that if I was a deep history major and I knew this stuff a lot, the history a lot better, then I could make a much clearer case for this. But I only know, I have obviously confirmation bias and all these personal human biases in my mind that are hard to overcome.
Fundamentally.
Yeah, you probably will, but let me get there.
I'm very capitalist.
I think that capitalism in itself has shown to be a very shoddy system and has its very serious fundamental flaws.
Because it works under the assumption that people will be selfish.
Yeah, and see, I don't even necessarily buy that. Like, it's to an extent, yes. Obviously, we all have an instinct to live. We all have an instinct. I don't know that we have an instinct for property, honestly, but that's something that's often talked about.
Think so?
I don't know because see, here's the thing. You and I have both grown up in a world that is like from the second you come out of the womb, consumerist and constantly pummels you with this idea that you need everything that is on TV and that they're advertising to you. Things are advertised in the school halls. It's so fucking insane in this country and other countries. And I don't really like consumerism. See, I think that
is one of the most important rights.
I think the main reason that so many people argue for capitalism and for markets is because they think that it leads to cheaper goods. And in some extent, maybe that is true, cheaper consumer goods, right? But cheaper consumer goods is not a good measure of a living standard, in my view. Because when all the other things that are really important, like housing, healthcare, clean air and water, all these things are going up in price or becoming harder and harder to access as a typical human being, while we get a fucking $2 steak. Like, ooh, woohoo, we get a $2 steak, we get $1 deodorant. What does any of that matter if healthcare and housing and clean water and air are like something that's no longer regulated, and now you have to worry about where you're living in terms of getting clean water and air? All these things are so crucial, and they're
another welfare thing I would support is a lot more for the homeless, offering shelter and things of that nature, job employment.
Well, I'm glad we agree to some extent that the government, it has its place, because I find it hard enough to get a lot of libertarians to agree to stuff like that. And maybe there's like a cultural shift happening. I don't know. I really hope so.
I don't know. I have no idea.
I don't know. And for me personally, I see the wealthy as an inherent threat to the rest of us. And I know not everyone sees it that way. But whenever someone, and certainly past a certain point, let's say we peg that point at $1 billion. Would you agree that when someone has $1 billion, they are inherently a threat to the rest of us because of the power that money can buy, whether it's in government or just in economics? Like, they can buy out a company that's doing good for a society and then just take it down. They can just close it.
They're definitely potentially a threat.
Mm-hmm. Potentially, right? Well, that's kind of my problem, is that capitalism seems to create haves and have-nots by default. It seems to, by default, create very rich people and very poor people. So, and I think government, I think to an extent that's more or less proven at this point. And again, if I was more well read on history, I could feel more strongly about making these points. But I think based on the history that I've looked at, when government does not heavily regulate the marketplace, it seems to lead to very poor conditions for the vast majority of people.
Do you think so? I will fundamentally disagree there.
I think so. And a lot of people will just say, well, just look at the countries around the world. The vast majority of capitalist countries, they are poor. And I understand that that's kind of an unfair metric to make, because these countries also have incomparable disadvantages that they're grappling with on top of a free market.
The majority of countries are poor.
Because, you can't just go to the Democratic Republic of Congo or something and be like, oh, look, they have a free market and they're doing terribly, so obviously the free market sucks. They have massive corruption there. They have gangs of warlords and shit. So
that was something that Milton Friedman had brought up, and he's very much influenced a lot of my economic thought.
Yeah.
But one thing he was saying is that someone brought up the point. Well, you said that where there's capitalism, people are prospering. You said no, that's not what I was saying. I was saying for people to be prospering, there needed to be capitalism, but that having capitalism wasn't enough. That wasn't enough inherently. He said it's necessary, but it inherently is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I would agree with that. I think we're very spoiled here. We are.
Oh yeah.
We are way better off. Our poor are the rich in the majority of the world.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't think that we should just give it a pass because of that. I mean, there are people in this country that are drinking lead right now.
Of course.
So
we should always need to improve.
And let me just say, living in Texas,
everybody has the idea that if someone is rich, that's the reason why we're poor, because someone else has that money. That money doesn't. Them having a lot of money, that does not require us to be poor for them to have all of that money.
I would disagree with that. Well, okay. It doesn't always mean
because
that,
it's not just
but I
the
think
national
fundamentally,
market. It's not just our money; it's the global market.
I think it doesn't always mean that, but fundamentally, there is a limited supply of monetary resource. Now, obviously, we have a fiat currency; you can print more of it, but generally speaking, there is limited wealth to go around. I mean, certainly in the physicality of that, like how much water there is, how much food there is. So there is. So to some extent, I do think when one person has $120 billion and the bottom half of the country has substantially less than the top, let's say the top 2% of people even, the bottom half has less than the top, what is it? Like when you talk about globally, it's like 8 people have more wealth than the bottom half.
I think
but in the U.S. alone,
also.
What's that?
Is a lot of that money isn't actually spending money.
Yeah. But also like land resources,
that's directly involved in their business, which employs a lot of people.
Yeah, but that's another thing that we get to here is that I buy very much into the Marxian school of economics and I've read many of the critiques of Marx, though I don't completely agree with obviously communism and all of that mess. I have my things that I pull from it, and I think that maybe it's obviously not a perfect system, and I have my ideas about that. But ultimately, in just the critiques, if we're just talking about the critiques that Marx made of capitalism, right. I definitely heavily I sympathize with them very largely, and I think just from a values perspective, to me there appears to be just something inherently wrong with there being an owner class and then a poor working class that's paid, they're paid very little and they're constantly competing against each other for smaller wages. And then there's also, there's a fundamental equation to capitalism where you have the material that goes into building things, you have the cost of labor that goes into building things, and then so that's the total value of the product, and then they add an amount on top that is the profit, and the profit does not go to the people who actually do the work to make it. It goes to the owners. It goes to the people who are, their property owners. That's I have a fundamental problem with that. What's that?
That's a big thing I hear about a lot.
Yeah.
But you as an employee at a business, right, you inquire, no, you don't adopt any of that risk. The risk. If the company goes belly up, you're just out of a job. They're fucked. Right.
But you don't think that's a risk?
Not only that, the
Is being out of
equipment,
a job?
everything in the business, you didn't pay for any of that. None of it. You just got hired.
Right, but that goes
Right.
into that's the basic materials that that goes into the material calculation. But what I'm saying is that ultimately there is a profit on top, and we often say that profit, okay, that's the incentive for capitalists to start their businesses, right? And that's why we allow that, is because the fact that someone can get rich is going to incentivize them to start the business. But what I'm saying is, why can't we just base society off the incentive to provide a good service to people? You know, I mean, I think the profit motive in many, certainly in many areas, it's
not enough. People are selfish.
What's that?
I think people are inherently selfish.
Maybe, but I don't think that changes. Well, okay, how do you feel about democratic co-ops? How do you think about democratically run companies where the profits are redistributed into the workers?
If that's what they want to do, that's fine.
Okay. Well, I'm down with that. What do you think about the government incentivizing those type of companies?
How
for instance, saying, okay, if you're going to start a company that's democratic, then we will give you a 10-year tax benefit. Basically, like you pay less taxes over the first 10 years. Yeah,
that's
and also. This is one of Jeremy Corbyn talks about this stuff a lot. Kind of an incentive to transition towards having at least a portion of the economy being democratic, more or less socially run companies. There's very like the Mondragon Corporation in Spain is one that I bring
voluntary.
Up. Yeah,
I have no problem with it.
I also like the idea of existing corporations that want to sell their company to the workers and turn it into democratic. Like if somebody has run this company for 30 years and they're retiring and they're like, okay, I'm going to offer it up to the employees, and the employees can all buy a share in it or whatever and pay me off that way. And then whenever it becomes a democratic co-op, the government gives them a tax, a tax benefit for a while, basically, because they decided to make that transition. I tend to think that a democratically run company would certainly make more ethical decisions with regard to how it treats its workers. Now, whether or not it is more profitable, that's another conversation to be had. I actually want to do a video examining that because there's a couple of studies that have been done on it. But, I really like this idea personally because
very interested to look more into that.
Because I do think that there's fundamental issues with capitalism that, to some extent, some capitalist countries are relatively stable, like Sweden, Norway, Denmark, etc., where they have high levels of, regulation on the market. But I sometimes wonder if we can't do better. And also, all of these countries are suffering from the same thing we're suffering from, which is that jobs are being shipped out, they are being automated. So we're going to have to grapple with the ever increasing intention of capitalists to lower their bottom line and lower the price of producing these things, because whether you like capitalism or don't like it, that just appears to be a truism of it, is that the owner class are going to continually try to lower the cost of production by any means necessary. And I worry that
I won't necessarily say that.
Well, and what ultimately because this culminates in
also might determine how many products they sell.
Yeah, and many people will say that is that, well, if you stop paying people to do this work, then eventually there won't be enough people to buy your goods, and so the economy comes crashing to a halt. And that's generally what happens, like in the Great Depression. But obviously, a lot of people suffered during that period if the government doesn't step in and do inflationary spending to some degree.
I think the government,
and I feel like that's a give and take that is.
I think the government actually
silly.
fucked that up a lot more than they helped that situation.
Oh boy,
I think
we
they
disagree
extended
on that
the Great
for sure.
Depression.
So you're part of the school that thinks that. And correct
I think
me if I'm
FDR
wrong.
is one of the worst presidents we've ever had. Probably the worst.
He's the best by far. The best
No.
by far.
He's the closest thing we've
man.
had to Hitler, dude.
What? Okay, well,
He's
the Japanese internment camp is pretty
German
fucked.
and Italian Americans in internment camps.
Yeah, duh, of course. But, his economic policies.
I think they were terrible. I think they were terrible. I think it extended.
They
There have been
end.
studies done on this you
Uh,
should look into, actually. I would like you to look
I
into it.
think there's very little evidence that he extended it.
I would like you to look into it, though, because that's
Okay.
something a lot of people, they assume because he was the president.
I
To
will
get
agree
better.
to look into it. How about that? I will agree to look into it.
Better. And I fundamentally disagree there. I think he made it worse. I think it would have fixed itself sooner.
I just don't know about that. I just don't know about that.
That's all right. I
Let's
mean,
see.
yeah, just look into it later. It's fine.
Yeah, I definitely will. Gosh, off the top of my head, I don't know how I would even address that right off the top of my head. So we'll probably just have to leave it at that. That's a really complicated discussion. And to be honest, I need to brush up on the history of that because it's been a while since I've gone through that. To be honest, I've been very deeply involved in kind of the present moment in politics, if you will.
Right. Well, of course.
Yeah. And I just, in general, I need to brush up on world history because I was hyper focused on that stuff when I was in high school and the few following years after high school. And I spent a lot of time doing drugs, and a lot of it just like went down that sinkhole of doing drugs and shit. So, you know, I'm not quite as sharp as I'd like to be right now, but it's a growing effort. You know, that's why I'm getting back into this primarily is to learn from people and really, I think that 2 years of doing this all the time will put me back at that. What's that?
I really admire what you're doing with the show. I think, and I'm curious what you think about this. I personally think more so from the left. That there has been an increase in people reluctant to support free speech.
Okay, that's actually the next discussion I want to get into with you. So let's just roll right into that. We'll save the government shit for another day.
Okay. Well, I mean, the government
because if I'm going to make any attempt to change your mind on the government and the free market, I'm going to have to come with info, and I'm just not prepared enough on that right now. So let's talk about free speech because I just did a segment on this yesterday, which I don't even know if I'm going to upload because it was really sloppy.
Oh, I haven't even. So you haven't uploaded yet.
Yeah, I was super sleep all this week. Let me just say, all this week I've been super sleep deprived, and my schedule's been all fucked up, and I just haven't been able to prepare for hardly anything. I prepared for the show, the Monday show of the week, which I think was very strong, and then Wednesday I was super unprepared, and today I'm super unprepared. So hopefully over the weekend I'll catch up on all of that. But yesterday I attempted
good conversation.
Yeah, Wednesday I attempted to do a conversation about free speech because I saw this particular article. Let's see if I can find it. Facebook EU. Aha, here we go. Facebook found hosting masses of far-right EU disinformation networks. And this wasn't just like the bullshit ones in the US where there was like 3 accounts that were like Russian and they supported BLM. Right. And what's that? Yeah, mostly far right. Yeah, exactly. And so this was literally like millions and millions of accounts that were subbed to like a handful, like what, 230 or 77 pages, where there was so many millions of accounts. It became clear that the amount of accounts, they dwarfed the actual members of these parties. So it just made no sense that they had so much, you know.
Do you think there was a bunch of bot accounts or something?
Oh yeah, they used. This is another thing that PragerU does is they use click farms to drive traffic and to drive the algorithms to put their stuff at the top when it's not organically getting that many clicks and getting that popular, and they're trying to use it to like drive discussion in a certain way.
Do that.
Yeah, and one of the things that was going around is they were showing like videos of immigrants, ostensibly Syrian refugees, attacking a police car, and literally the footage was from a movie. It didn't happen. It was from a fucking movie, yeah. And it's just like the Donald Trump, like these are buses of all the immigrants coming in to vote for Hillary, you know, that kind of shit. And
the caravan.
It's scary because like there are genuinely large forces that are trying to use the algorithmic element of these massive social media programs to drive traffic and to try to drive democracy in a certain way. But at the same time, I'm highly skeptical of them taking shit down to begin with. Like they just took all these accounts down, and maybe that was the right thing to do in this situation. I don't know. Like where you draw the line on inauthentic behavior actually
Right.
being inauthentic. But in general, I tend to side
that
on
applies to everyone, not just
yeah.
them.
And up till now, I've generally applied the standard of, well, just don't fucking take people down in general. Like, leave them the fuck alone. The battle of ideas will ultimately like win out for good. But clearly, that's not happening. Clearly, the battle of ideas is won mostly in manipulation tactics, sadly. And
I don't think that the battle of ideas is even the reason why that should be people's concern.
Yeah. To be sure, that's not the only argument.
Just that it could be used to silence legitimate things.
Yeah, and it already has. There's a lot of left-wing groups, actually. And this was the documentary that you posted. I had kind of a nitpick on that because I thought that was really cool. But they should have also included a lot of the left-wing people that were affected by this, because there was genuinely...
Sure, they talked briefly about the left-wing people.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I wish they would have talked more about it.
There were pages that were left-wing that were calling out cops, and all they did was they were like cop advocacy programs and posting like, you know, cop brutality videos and stuff, and they got taken down.
It's generally more left-wing people that are posting anti-cop stuff, and yeah, that shit does get taken down.
Bullshit. Because, you know, it could have just been like, I know when I first got on YouTube, I used all kinds of third-party applications to like automatically send out tweets and send out messages to people, you know, spam messages on YouTube. I admit this, you know, send out messages saying like, hey, I saw that you commented on a review of Borderlands. Come check out my game review, you know, and under how they're looking at this, just if you use any kind of third-party application that's inauthentic, quote, inauthentic behavior, they can just use that as a, like, if someone's complaining about you and you're getting a bunch of reported messages, they can just use that as a reason to ban you.
Or they can just pretend
it's like a catch-all. Yeah, exactly. It's a catch-all. It's a fucking dragnet. And that's what worries me about this, is that on the one hand, there are people that are seriously, you know, using these tactics, these really underhanded tactics to drive democracy in a certain direction. But at the same time, I don't trust Facebook to be the arbiter of dealing with this.
No.
So,
and the problem is they've monopolized.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's where everyone is. They're all on Facebook.
Yeah.
They're all on Facebook. So what alternative do you have?
Dude,
like, people try to make
YouTube's the one that bothers me most, though, to be honest, because YouTube is a total monopoly.
Oh, YouTube.
YouTube is the worst. Like, they don't give two shits about us. Like TJ, for example, he's got 1 million subs, and they have treated him like shit. They don't give two fucks what he thinks.
Most people don't post anything on YouTube.
Yeah.
That's the only thing. Like, YouTube is definitely worse towards its creators. Like,
I mean,
Facebook is.
They renegotiated our ad prices down to oblivion. A lot more people are
actually actively creating things on Facebook, posts, whatever.
Yeah.
Right, on Facebook than people are on YouTube. The vast majority of people on YouTube aren't creating anything. They're watching.
Yeah. Right. And I don't know. Also, YouTube and well, I don't know if YouTube has done it yet, but Twitch, like there's a guy named Vaush on Twitch who I was watching. I'm kind of split on him because he's kind of an asshole, but he's a socialist guy, and he got banned on Twitch literally for making a joke about Israel, and they just banned his account. He was like, you know, Israel is going fucking nuts. We should stop. What did he say? We should stop giving bombs to Israel and start dropping bombs on Israel. And, like, that goes a little far. Like it was a tongue-in-cheek, really. That was a really edgy joke, right? But even that, I don't think that should get you banned. Like that's, you know, Alex Jones has said worse things like that, and I don't think he should be banned. So,
of course not.
God,
I don't like Israel at all, but
yeah.
I mean, like,
advocating dropping bombs on anyone. That's, you know, that's one of the reasons why.
Actually, in Bernie Sanders,
this guy's kind of an asshole.
Bernie Sanders had posted something I had a big problem with. He was talking about Israel, and at first I was like, okay, well, I mean, I kind of like where you're going with this. He was talking about there's some problems going on with Israel, but he was like, we need to help them come to a resolution with this, and I'm like, no, we don't.
What do you mean?
We don't need to have anything to fucking do with this, man. This is their fight. This is their thing. I may not agree with what they're doing, but this has nothing to do with us.
Well, I guess it depends what he meant in that context. I mean, I'm in favor of like BDS, You know, like stop sending them
that?
money. You know, that's one.
Sure.
I mean, not like going in there militarily and telling them what to do, but
Right.
just be like,
Yeah,
hey,
sure.
until you fix this, no more money. Sorry.
I guess, and maybe I was wrong about the way I interpreted it,
Yeah.
but the way I saw the post, it was. It
Bernie's
seemed
definitely
like
said some questionable
military
things on it.
intervention is what they were sort of suggesting,
Yeah, and he
or
was
the threat, at least of it.
he used to be against BDS. Actually, he was like, no, I'm not in favor of boycotting Israel. I don't know. I think he's changed his opinion on that since then, but that I did break with him on that, unfortunately.
You might have
and
gotten pressure from some other
maybe because
people in his.
progressives are like really hardcore on that issue. They're like, you know,
Yeah, I've noticed
seriously.
more of them. Like Omar has talked a lot about that and stuff.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh yeah, free speech. That's what we were talking about. Well, what about? So, at what point? Okay, let me ask you this question: at what point is it okay to deplatform somebody? Would you say never, or do you think there are situations where, in the private market of ideas, if enough people come together and say like, we really want this person off your platform, so fuck them. You know, this person like is a Nazi
If
or
they
whatever.
call for direct, I would only allow someone if, like, let's say I was in charge of these social media companies. I would only support them being deplatformed if they actually broke our speech laws as they stand today. Right.
Like libel, slander, threats of violence.
If you were, I guess mostly just the call to violence. Right. If you're directly calling for violence, yeah sure. Platform that guy.
That's reasonable.
Right. But anything else, I'd say leave it up.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm probably gonna have to agree with that. I mean, I've really, because a lot of people have made these comments, like Destiny, for example. I think he's in favor of deplatforming people who have repeatedly shown that they are dishonest actors, like they're just non-genuine and they're intentionally trying to mislead and lie to people. And yeah, exactly. Like who's the arbiter of that is my problem. And he's like, well, it's based on
power and control to someone else at that point.
And he's really grappled with this because like he was like a free speech absolutist too, as I understand. But now he's like, well, if direct action demands it and this person is just lying repeatedly and manipulating, fuck them, send them packing or whatever. But you know, I just wonder who is the arbiter in that situation. And I don't want the mob to be the arbiter. I don't want Facebook and YouTube to be the arbiter. So that worries me, I guess. And
I've seen. This is one of the greatest freedoms we have in this fucking country, man. It's freedom of speech.
It's one of the things the U.S. actually gets really right. It's like probably the best country in that regard.
It's a common thing. It's not. We're the only Western country, actually, with the right to free speech.
Yeah.
The only one.
The only one?
Yes, the only Western country.
But would you say it's the only one where it's observed? Because, I mean...
It's the only one where it's a guaranteed right.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's probably true. I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm going to go with it.
When I was in Australia, I wanted to go do a protest, which I did. And luckily, I wasn't reported. I could have been. But I was looking up what their laws were regarding free speech and all of that. If you say anything, I shit you not, this is the legislation. It says if you say anything that would be deemed offensive to any quote-unquote reasonable, rational person, you can face months in jail and pay $600 in fines.
Oh, that's fucked, dude. Yeah, I had heard that, like, in some Europe...
They started pushing the thing recently that I believe passed while I was over there, where if you were talking shit about Australia's foreign policy, you could be arrested.
Ah, for fuck's sake. Yeah, I mean, that's why I honestly, people kind of use this as a straw man of the left, because I genuinely... I have seen almost no lefties call for this, but like hate speech laws. I mean, I know a lot of left-wing people. I've never seen any of them call for it personally, but that's just because the ones I hang out with are more, you know, like this is Texas, right?
Maybe we just hung out with very different lefties.
Yeah, because I mean, like this is Texas.
I've met a lot of people.
You know, maybe if I was in like California or Washington or Oregon, you may see those type of people. But generally, what I've seen are people who are
is because of the fact that you're talking to people in the U.S.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We're a lot more
good
about that issue.
Right.
In Australia, I met a ton of people ton of
Oh,
people
I,
because
I
they have
bet,
hate
dude.
speech laws there.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of people I talked to supported it.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. There's places in Europe where you can get arrested for doing like the Sieg Heil, you know? Right?
Sure, yeah, of course.
Yeah. It's
And
so yeah. I
even
mean,
in
that is
Canada
one
now,
of the things the U.S.
like,
gets so right.
I don't know what your thoughts are on Jordan Peterson. Like, you don't even have to like him, man. Like, what the thing that made him popular? I firmly agree with him on the thing that made him popular.
Yeah.
Was the argument against having the state enforce how you address people, right? Like their gender norms. Like,
Yeah.
of course, I'm all in support of
Yeah.
the trans stuff, man. Completely in support of it, right? Whatever they want me to call them, whatever pronouns they want to go by that they identify with, that's fine. I'll call them that. But the state should never enforce that.
Yeah.
And that's what made it really
definitely.
popular. But Canada does. They enforce that. If you misgender someone intentionally,
on the laws right now,
that's a crime.
Huh? What is using the
To
wrong
misgender
pronoun?
intentionally.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Because I heard from many people that was overblown, but to be fair, I haven't done a lot of detailed digging into it. I dug into it for like a minute back when it was brought up,
California
the
had almost
C-13
done
or whatever it
something
was.
to that extent. California
well, if they
almost
do,
did.
it's unconstitutional. So I mean, fuck them.
Well,
it'll get taken to
actually,
court.
this was unconstitutional, what California did, because it was specifically for, and I actually kind of agree with him on this.
What?
This was specifically for employers if they were intentionally calling their employees right, or clients right, by the wrong gender. If they were intentionally doing that, then that would be illegal. That I actually agree with.
Yeah, that's reasonable. That's reasonable for sure.
At least be grounds to fire them.
I thought you were gonna say like political
just in general,
opinions
no, that would
taken.
really be unconstitutional. It was just generally speaking.
I think when you're at work, if you're like always bringing up your political position and it's like a nuisance, I get firing in that case. But there's some companies that are like, they spy on you outside work, and if you take positions outside work, they'll fire you. Like Walmart was found using they like subcontracted to, I think, Lockheed Martin or someone, and they were literally spying on their basically their employees who were planning to do a strike. That were trying to form a union and stuff. Yeah. And they were literally spying on them.
Oh, wow.
And and I don't know if they actually took action against them, but they just wanted to know like when it was going to happen and be ready for it, essentially. So
we'll be right back again. I'm so sorry.
Sure. No problem. Shit, man. Oh, fuck me, dude. I haven't even been recording. I'm gonna be just dependent on YouTube.
What's that?
I forgot to hit record, so I'm just basically banking on the fact that YouTube is gonna give me a solid recording. Oh well.
With the app you need.
Yeah.
Well, when you live stream, right, it records the whole thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. On YouTube, it does. Well, it does on Twitch too, but on Twitch, it gets rid of it after a while.
Right.
Hopefully, we're all good though. Where were we? Shit.
We were talking about free speech.
Yeah. I find it so fascinating that other countries don't have that basic thing. That's fucked,
Mhm.
dude.
We really take it for granted.
Yeah.
That was one thing. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I loved my time in Australia. I thought it was great. Like, I met a lot of super cool people.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful country, but their
Of
government
course.
scared the fuck out of me.
Really?
Yes, absolutely.
Huh.
Like even more
Well,
so than ours. And I'm terrified of our government.
they have a right-wing government right now, don't they?
Well,
Or relatively?
I mean, like, yes, it's their right wing. Yeah,
Okay.
I think generally speaking, Australia and like Europe, their right wing is less right wing than our right
Yeah.
wing.
No, yeah. The US, I mean, that's kind of one of my main critiques of the US is that our Overton window is totally out of whack. And people
I think though that there are certain things that our right wing does get right that I wish these other countries would do.
like what?
Well, for example, I am mortified by Australia's weapon and defense laws.
Eh?
You can't carry any weapons on you in public. You
Okay.
can't carry a gun at all. You can't carry a knife. You can't carry a taser. You can't carry pepper spray. You can't wear a protective vest.
Well, I have a feeling that the, I guess, quote left, the Democrats in the U.S., I have a feeling most of them are okay with most of that stuff. I mean, I haven't.
What with those bans?
Huh? With
With
being able to carry, certainly at least pepper spray and stuff like that, but I think probably a good chunk of them are still pro-gun. I mean, they just mostly want a background check. That's like the key kind of litmus test of the party at this point. But I honestly don't think it's even a majority of Democrats that would ban guns. Maybe a majority
No,
would ban
I don't
assault
think the
weapons.
majority would ban them. I think they would put a lot more restrictions than I want.
Yeah. I want a universal background check, but that's basically it. Like, other than that, I don't care. I don't care about banning magazine sizes. I don't care. Honestly,
That's good. That's
like,
good then. You are way
yeah.
beyond a lot of people I've talked
Yeah,
to. from the
true,
left on this
true.
issue.
Like, I think Kyle, he's a fair moderate on guns, and even he wants to ban large magazines. But I just don't know that that's necessary.
I don't want to
I could be
ban.
persuaded.
Here's my thing. Here's my thing. I don't think there should be any gun laws.
Really?
None. None. I'm not saying I don't like the idea of background checks and everything. I just don't think
Uh-huh.
that should be a government controlled thing. I think if a private company is like, okay, we don't want to get a lot of shit if someone shoots up a bunch of people, so we're going to do what we can to provide security for our sales
Mm.
and do background checks and all of that. I don't think the government should be allowed to legislate anything with
I mean,
that.
but they don't, right? I mean, like, they haven't shown a willingness to do that in my experience. I mean, from what
What's
I've
that?
seen, do
What,
background
like,
checks or anything like
well,
that.
they
I mean,
all do. They all have to.
where? I mean, in some
Everywhere.
states.
Any gun vendor.
Really?
Yeah, all of them have to. Here's the problem
every
with the
type of
background
gun?
checks, though.
In
They're
every
not very
state?
effective.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Every state. The problem is they're not very effective.
Uh-huh.
Because unless you've already done something, what are they looking for?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's true.
Unless
Yeah.
you've already gone crazy.
So you're talking about a
then
criminal
they have no reason
background
to
check.
suspect that you're a problem.
Well, you're talking about a criminal background check. Yeah. I mean, if you've committed like a violent felony, sure. But like, I mean,
Well,
my
it's
dad,
psychological.
my
If you're
dad
diagnosed-
can't buy
if you're
handguns, but he
diagnosed-
can still buy rifles, you know.
Like
And he has a violent
diagnosed
felony.
with depression or some other disorder, you
Mm-hmm.
also can't purchase a gun.
Nationally.
Yes.
Like anywhere in the US.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't aware of that. If that's
With
true.
the exception of course, there are peer-to-peer sales in some states, like Kentucky allows peer-to-peer.
Isn't that basically like the gun show loophole at gun shows? It's basically considered a peer-to-peer or...
Well, it depends actually on the gun show and the person there. But like, let's say here in Kentucky, if somebody wants to sell me a gun, all they would have to do, like let's say they own the gun, they want to sell it to me. All they would have to do is write down on a piece of paper, this is the date, this is who I sold it to, this is how you can contact them. So then if I ever did do something right, the police would then see the gun, if they'd figure out what gun it was, they'd go to them first and then see, oh, he sold it to this person on this date. Right. So now we need to go look for this person. But as far as actual gun vendors, yeah, no, they all have to do background checks. And they keep a registry of all their sales and everything. Which, honestly, I'm not even entirely sure I support having those registries. Because ideally, the way it's supposed to work legally is the cops aren't allowed to just go to a vendor and say, I just want to see everyone on your registry, right? They're supposed to have to go there and say, we're looking for this specific individual because we have suspicion that they've committed a crime. Right. Then they can show you that specific individual if they bought a gun there. But I don't trust that that's actually what happens all the time. So I don't know if I support having that be mandatory.
Yeah. I do. I definitely do. So you're talking about the National Instant Criminal Background Check from the Brady Bill?
Assume the worst will happen someday. Right. So in that situation, let's say the government is worried about revolt.
Yeah.
Right. They'll just go to these gun stores and figure out everyone who has a gun. And they'll be the first people they take out. Or take their guns from, disarm. Right. So I don't want to fuck with that.
We may have a bit of a difference. I mean, firstly, I kind of interpret, for instance, the Second Amendment, which is like the law that most of this is based around. I interpret it to mean that, well, I look at the portion, the well regulated. I take that seriously, and I do think that to some extent it should be.
Militia.
Yeah, and I do think that it should be.
How do you think that militia gets formed?
I mean, it's in some ways that you can interpret it. That could just mean the police, but I don't. I think the citizens.
Dude.
Yeah. I think that citizens should have access to firearms, obviously.
Right.
But I do think that there are limitations with that, and I think that we should have extensive background checks. The background system that we have now, or at least
this is what I'm curious about, because I hear a lot of people make this argument. We need stronger background checks. What would you recommend we do differently?
I would have, as I understand, and I could be wrong because this is one of those issues that I'm not super crazy about. Like, I've always been kind of a pro-gun lefty. I've never been like raging at the mouth, ban them. That's because banning shit just doesn't work, right? Banning drugs didn't work.
Especially in the U.S.,
banning alcohol didn't work. So banning things outright doesn't work. Now, regulation can limit them, and it has been shown, like, for instance, Australia, their homicides have dropped as a result of the shit that they did. Not that I agree with all of it. So, I mean, you may get outcomes from it, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that you immediately err on the side against freedom. I think that there is a give and take relationship between safety and freedom, and I want everyone to have access to guns. But
the violent crimes actually increased, for the record.
Well, I mean, there's different stats you can look at, but it definitely has not been all negative.
This is what really bothers me, though, when it comes to people talking about, like, guns and that nature. And when it comes to crime, is they're only concerned about gun violence. They're not looking at overall violence.
This is an argument a lot of people attempt to make, is like, oh, well, the amount of knife crimes went up, and it's like, okay. But, it
does. It goes up.
But in in every single case, the amount does not compensate for the amount lost by the guns.
Yes, it does.
I've never seen that. I've never seen that borne out in the evidence. I've looked at quite a few of these.
Violent crime has increased.
Really?
Yes.
And
this was also, something that was very interesting.
We have to look at this independent of other factors too, because I mean there could be any number of things to increase the violence over a period. It could be economic destabilization, political destabilization. So
I don't mean to interrupt. I was just saying, like, with Australia in particular, because I'd always heard that they were like the perfect example of when you take extreme measures with guns.
Oh, they're not the
you
best
can
example.
get
Yeah.
results from it.
I would definitely not say that.
And the thing is that people point to, well, they had a mass shooting and then they banned a lot of guns, right? And then they haven't had any mass. They've had just as many mass shootings as they ever did. One before, one after. That's all they ever had. It's not even comparable at all. Not at all, because this was never a huge thing for them. They had one mass shooting, and then they banned all of these guns, made it a lot more difficult for people to get firearms. They're not allowed to own firearms for defense, period.
And they did a buyback program. Briefly.
Yes, which would never work here.
No, it would never work here. I mean, just the amount of money that would cost. There's how many? There's as many or more guns in circulation as there are people in this country.
As there are people.
Think about that.
It would be insane.
No, I would never be in favor of a gun buyback. That's just unprecidented.
No, there's no way we could do that.
In the U.S., we have
actually have more guns in Australia now than they did back before the ban.
Really? I wasn't aware of that, honestly.
They have more guns now. They have more restrictions on what guns they can have. And why they can have them. But they have more guns than they had before the ban.
Well, I mean, the existing criminal background checks, obviously, but I would expand it if it's not the case. You seem to think that they also include psychological, but I do know that one aspect of that was removed during the Trump administration. They
actually no, it wasn't removed.
Or they were trying to. I don't know if they actually managed it.
I supported this. No, they did make a change, but they didn't remove that, right?
Because it was people who were not able to control their own money, right? Like they were deemed unable to control their money by reason of insanity or
legislation that did a blanket ban for anyone with a mental disorder. So that included mental disorder, like OCD and shit. They weren't allowed to buy a gun.
Any mental disorder.
On whether or not they could responsibly own a firearm. All the Trump repeal of that did was make it to where they would look at it on an individual basis.
Okay.
Right. So if there was somebody who had a mental disorder, but it wasn't a disorder that would affect them being able to responsibly own a firearm.
I'm not sure if we're thinking about the same thing.
What's that?
Well, I'm not sure if we're thinking about the same thing. Because what I heard was that it was a check on people who were deemed unable to manage their own money. So they're psychologically either gone in terms of being elderly, or maybe they're just psychologically, like they have, maybe it's schizophrenia or something. I don't know what particular things may fall under this, but if they were deemed by a court unable to manage their own money, then they're deemed unable to get a firearm because you can't trust them with it. If they can't manage money, then how are they going to manage the responsibility of owning a firearm, basically? That's what I heard.
The same thing then.
Yeah. But I would have obviously the criminal background check, psychological evaluation.
Sure, I think those are both good things.
Yeah. I don't know what I would expand it beyond that, but probably just those two things are the main key aspects. And as long as that is all extensively covered, and also a waiting period. This is important. It has to be a set waiting period, and they can't sell you a gun until that waiting period is done. And the background check is fulfilled. And the background check is fulfilled. So if the background check takes longer than the waiting period, they gotta wait some longer. So, and maybe it's 72 hours.
How long would you personally recommend?
I'm not qualified to make that call, but I would say ballparking at 72 hours, maybe.
Oh, that's it.
Huh?
That's it.
Is that the current one?
Well, generally speaking, you can't just go and buy a gun and leave.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the gun, doesn't it?
Well, it probably just depends on the
Yeah.
state, to be honest.
Like I said, this is an issue that I'm not super like. I've always been very pro gun, so I don't really think too deeply into it. I've done some research,
Well, I mean,
but the
if all
research
you're
is like long
requiring
ago,
is
so I'm
72
pulling
hours,
information from the
down with
memory
that.
banks.
That's fine. I'm totally down with that.
What's that?
That'd be fine.
Oh yeah, yeah, okay.
72
Yeah, that's
hour waiting
basically
period.
where I'm at. I just think handling this in a way of banning
But
things
again,
just
I just
does
don't
not
think
seem
the
to
state should be the one in control of that. I think that should be the vendor's decision.
the vendors. Okay, well, I guess we'll agree to disagree on that one.
I'm sure we do disagree there. It's all right. I just again where you my fear is you give them an inch, they'll
Oh
take it a
yeah,
mile,
yeah.
and I
I
don't
don't
want them
know.
to go a mile.
I guess but I think probably the larger conversation though is like who runs the government? Because right now, I think would you agree with me that we need to get money out of politics?
Sure.
Okay. Because that's kind of the main
That's
thing for
a
me.
lot of
Like
politics.
if Bernie made that his sole objective and that was the only
I don't
thing
think
that he could get done in his presidency, that's what it should be. It should be getting money out of politics because that's like the
I don't think
foundation that corrupts
it would make
everything.
it worse unintentionally.
What's that?
I think you would make it worse unintentionally.
Him?
Yes.
Ow.
I think my main problem with money in politics, I think the main reason money is so prevalent in politics
Uh-huh.
is because we've given the government too much control over the market. And so because of that, these companies, everybody assumes that these companies' goal is to get the government to deregulate. And generally speaking, that's not what is the most beneficial to these big corporations. What's most beneficial to them is to pass regulations that they can deal with because they're the big dog that their competition can't deal with. It's crippling to their competition.
This happens, but I don't know that that's the larger one.
I believe
it depends
that's
on
the
the
larger
industry,
problem.
right? I think it depends on the industry because when you look at like the financial sector, it is unquestionable that they stand to gain almost exclusively from the regulations that are taken off because they make ridiculous gambles with everybody's money. They make a ton of money up front, and then they crash the economy, and then we bail them out because they have us held over a barrel, and they're like, what are you going to do? We make all your fucking money. So, I don't know.
With what industry? Sorry, what was that?
Financial.
Oh,
So,
okay, like
Wall Street, banks, etc. They stand to make a lot from deregulation.
The problem with that wasn't the banks, though.
What?
It was the fact that we bailed them out.
Well, I do disagree with bailing them out, or I think if we're gonna bail them out, it should have at least come with major caveats. And we didn't get anything from them, and that's kind of the core point is we didn't get any fucking.
Another thing, like similarly, like what Obama did with the car industry, I thought that was fucking terrible.
I thought that was good. I mean, largely that was mostly, just average workers that were held up in those jobs. Now, obviously, they shuttered a lot of those jobs shortly after, so they didn't really pay us back. But
as far as the business is concerned, the free market can't do what it's supposed to do. If any time a business fails, you just give them money. The whole point is if a business fails, it was a shitty idea.
Right, but the free market, this goes back to the free market being terrible at arbitrating these things. Like the implicit failures of the free market, like when things just go out of business and, oh, you should just let it fail. Well, things don't always fail because they were doing a bad service. And also, on the flip side, things don't always succeed because they were doing particularly good. They could be particularly good at just manipulating the markets and using advertising to manipulate demand. So people, like, this goes back to people are not very good economic computers. They're not good at making long-term good decisions in terms of their finances and their money. And so that's why these regulations, in theory, are supposed to exist, is to cover the difficulties in people's ability to compensate or make decisions in the marketplace. This is called behavioral economics.
What are your thoughts on Social Security?
I think it's one of the most popular programs ever made for good
I
reason.
think it's been an abysmal failure.
I mean, it's objectively kept tens of millions of people from dying and having abject
Originally,
poverty.
sure. What about now?
Now the government has borrowed a lot of money out of it, and it's going broke because they refuse to raise the cap.
there's, people are living longer. They're using more money from it than what's being put in.
I mean, that contributes to some extent, but they also have
People
borrowed a
that
shitload of money out
are
of it.
paying into Social Security now are never going to see a cent of it.
That's if we don't raise the cap. But that's Bernie's plan, is to raise the cap. Currently, a person who makes 250 grand pays the exact same amount in Social Security taxes as someone who makes 100 billion, right? So you just raise the cap. You say, all right, there's no cap. You all pay the same percentage across the board. I don't care how rich you are, you know? Whereas right now it caps out at 250K.
Similar thing, I suppose. I'm curious what you would think of this. A fair tax rate.
What do you mean? I hope you don't mean a flat tax, because that's horrible.
Yeah, like everybody pays the same percentage of a tax.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, it disproportionately hurts the people on the bottom, so I think that's horrible. I mean, well, for example, like sales tax is probably the most regressive form of tax there is, because it applies to the same across the board to everybody. And somebody who makes 1,000 times more than me can't spend 1,000 times more money than I do. So it disproportionately affects people who go to the store and buy goods for their life. So a flat tax, well, I think it's a bad idea. I think you should definitely have higher percentages on people who make more money.
I would almost say ban income tax and rely entirely on sales tax.
Well, then it is impossible to do universal health care with that.
Well,
which maybe you're okay with, but I don't even know if it's possible to do any of the stuff you want to do with that. I mean, addressing climate change, for example, never going to happen on just a flat tax or a sales tax.
Do you think the government is going to be the one to take care of that, though?
I mean, it's the only entity that has any remote chance of addressing that. I mean, the free market, for all its benefits, which there are some, right? It has shown a complete inability to deal with climate change, and that's just only going to remain.
I disagree fundamentally.
I mean, our consumption is what is driving this planet's total and complete destruction.
Regardless of what system we're under, we're always going to be consumers.
To an extent. But we need to be balanced consumers.
Some other than capitalism could improve the amount that we're consuming, right? Mm-hmm. Make less, as if we just don't allow ourselves to have the things we want anymore. That's the only way.
Not necessarily. Well, I mean, this gets back to the reason that I tend to favor welfare systems is because, let's say you do protectionism and you force you set price controls and you force all jobs to be, very high paying jobs, and people will say, okay, well, that'll drive up the cost of goods. I don't care if it drives up the cost of goods. I absolutely don't. I actually think that is a good thing. I want people to think twice about buying everyday goods at the store. I want things like housing, water, education, food. I want all of these things to be readily available through either government programs or price controls. But things like, video games, things like plastic toys, things you don't need. I don't care if that shit is so expensive that you really have to moderate your spending on that, and you have to think twice about what you're wanting to consume. You should have relative comfort. Be able to buy a decent amount of video games and stuff, and there's a big conversation to be had. But
I don't personally. I don't see a point in living if you can't have nice things that you don't need.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's also nice to be able to not care whether or not you're going to be able to pay for your health insurance. I mean, and when you look at these
things, increasing is going to help that.
A lot of these Western countries, in Europe, actually, I don't know, they may have done this in Australia. Maybe the goods there are really expensive, but they have very high consumption taxes. I wanted to bring that up. Very high. Because
this is one thing, when I went to Australia, that fundamentally changed my political beliefs.
Yeah.
Because I saw a lot of the things in practice that I thought I believed in, and I wasn't
Uh-huh.
pleased with the result. And one example of those was the minimum wage. Their minimum wage is almost $19.
Hell yeah.
And as a result of that, everything is twice as expensive, at least in that
Of
country.
course.
Everything.
Yeah. And a lot of people they make issue with this, but I don't see it negatively personally. I mean, and this is why a lot of liberals they argue against protectionism because they're like, well, the jobs are better, huh?
I'm against protectionism.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. And I'm not as super protectionist as I used to be. I recognize that to some extent it does have its limitations. But generally speaking, I favor better jobs, even if it means things will cost more. And I also favor higher taxes to pay for the things that we all basically need, education, healthcare, police, etc. And, obviously, we're in a rich country and we are very highly functional. If you invest in things like education and stuff, we'll get good jobs. And even though goods will be more expensive, look at all the other things that we're getting for free. I mean, not for free, but for very cheap. Healthcare will be at least probably, a third less expensive, if not half as expensive as it currently is. So we will have more disposable income in other areas, but it may ultimately end up, if you have all these good programs and a good thriving social economy, it may end up that some goods are 20%, 30%, 50%, even 100% more expensive. And in most cases, I'm okay with that if it means that the basic necessities of life are afforded to everybody by default. And that's what basically informs my perspective, is that I largely think the inequalities of very poor people versus extremely rich people is inherently unethical. I have this I see honestly capitalism at this point as a highly unethical system, and we should abandon it to whatever extent is possible. And I don't know to what extent that's possible.
I agree that there are rich people who have way the fuck more than they're ever going to need.
Uh-huh.
Right. And there's a lot of people who don't have enough.
Yeah.
I don't think, especially with our country in particular, because of how large a population we have, I don't think that can solve our issues. Because once you divide the amount of money they have that's actually expendable income amongst all of these people, there's not a lot left. There's not a lot for us to use.
I don't follow you.
Like, let's say someone has $1 billion.
Right.
Or let's say, okay, just to make the math easier for this example, let's say somebody has $300 million. It's a lot of fucking money for one person to have, right? You divide that amongst the entire country. Let's say you took all of their money, all of it, not just what they have.
It'd be like $1 a person, yeah.
$1 a person, that's nothing.
Yeah. I know, but we're also talking about, in just offshore accounts, just in one given country, there was one that was estimated to be about like $7 trillion. And that's just one of these tax haven countries. There's probably a dozen or so of these tax haven countries. And just in that one country, there was like $7 trillion just sitting there. And, I understand that putting a lot of this money back into the ecosystem could drive up prices. It could drive up inflation, et cetera. Paying off our debt with printed money could drive up inflation. But honestly, I'm in favor of short-term deficit spending for long-term results, even if that means a little bit of debt up front. And even if it doesn't pay itself back 100% in the long term, offset that by printing some money. Yeah, it'll drive prices up to some extent. You print it over a certain period of time, it'll drive up prices. Whoop-de-doo. Eventually, we balance the sheet, and that's what's most important. So,
I don't think we'll ever balance it if we keep printing money.
I mean,
to
some extent, you scale back military spending, you change your tax structure.
Inflate our dollar 4 times a year.
What's that?
The Federal Reserve will arbitrarily inflate our dollar 4 times a year.
Oh, yeah?
And it's been doing it since its inception. When was that? Like 100 years ago?
Yeah,
I think that's
about that
worst
much,
thing we ever did to a country.
And they need to be audited, by the way. They seriously need to be audited.
Yes.
That was one of the things that
More than audited, they need to be fucking abolished. We need to start a new system that's one thing. I do want government controlled, because this is a private company that's printing all of our fucking money.
Yeah, it definitely needs to
That's
be
not
audited. But I definitely heavily buy into modern monetary theory in general. I used to be a big fan of
well, like,
Austrian economics,
what do you
but
think about Bitcoin and stuff?
I'm actually I have like originally $10,000 invested in cryptocurrency. So yeah, but it was a bad time to invest it.
Yeah,
I'll
it's
put it
a
that
friend
way.
too.
It's not worth
They
that
got in on
much.
it just the right time. They made bank off of it, man.
Yeah, I knew a lot of people who did. I seem to have got in at the wrong time, but it's coming back at this point. Like Bitcoin's
I
actually,
heard it was starting to come back.
yeah,
Actually, it was doing
Bitcoin's
very
doing
poorly for
really
a
good
while.
right now. What is it at like 8K now or something like that?
Doing very good now.
Bitcoin right now is at, it was very close to, yeah, 7968. It was, oh, it came over 8 for a second there today actually. So it's probably going to be over 8. Damn it, man. I thought about buying in when it was at 4 and I
I
had,
want to start getting into stocks now
yeah.
that they legalized hemp in the U.S. with that farm bill,
Dude, I
and
wanted to do that from the second
probably
that
maybe
happened,
start to
and I'm
legalize
a
pot.
goddamn idiot.
What was that?
I wanted to do that from the second it happened, and I'm a goddamn idiot. I don't know why I didn't do that. Also,
I
when
still
Trump
have,
was
I
elected,
just don't have enough money to fucking put into it.
oh, excuse me for a second. I'll be right back. Give me one
All
second.
right,
Can't hear me, right? Okay. Can you?
I
Oh,
can't.
shit. Oops.
I should have just said no.
Howdy.
Hello.
Nice. God, where were we? Nothing important, probably. Um, God, we were all
We've
over
been
the place
rambling at
here.
this point,
We
man.
were really all over the place. I'm gonna have to be a lot more structured next time, but yeah,
What, man? It's been a good talk.
yeah, it was a good experiment, if anything.
Good
I want to
trial
do this a
run.
lot better next time, but I'm gonna get my fucking sleeping schedule fixed over this goddamn weekend and start prepping a lot more. And also, mainly, I just need to take a day to get ahead on all of the technical side of this because I just kind of set a bunch of shit up and assumed it would just go, and then it turns out there's quite a bit of a learning curve even after doing this for so many years. But whatever.
So you figure it out.
Abe
try.
wannabe Lincoln on the right side of the screen. That's a comment that we got. Thing is, Switzerland has the highest population with firearms per capita in the world and one of the lowest firearm crimes per capita. That's kind of misleading. There's a catch, though. The most of the male population has got to have a military-assigned firearm.
They have to join the military.
Yeah, about 50% of the Swiss population has to have a firearm required by their army. Is this a live on YouTube? Are you on YouTube live stream? I am the second watcher you got. You say me, Jack, all bye. I'm go have fun talking to no. Oh, whatever, dude. That's the problem with YouTube is I don't have an integrated chat with the OBS, unfortunately, and it's really frustrating.
Right.
Yeah, with with Twitch, there was integrated chat, and that's why I was doing it. But I'm not a Twitcher, so no one really shows up compared to YouTube. Oh well. And even YouTube's kind of fucking with me at this point, so I don't know.
God, YouTube is fucking worse.
It's gonna take some growing pains, and I need to get some damn some Adderall, so I can keep my thoughts in order, because I seriously,
I feel that.
yeah, sometimes I just have critical, and it's also part of the whole the concept of discussion is like I have to be rude with people on purpose. I have to like forcibly interrupt them, otherwise I will not get my point out because I'll just forget about it, and I'm too nice. It's really hard for me to interrupt people and be rude. So
I don't have a problem with interrupting people. I have a problem after I do it. I feel bad about it, but I do it all the time because I just don't fucking think about
I just got to get used to it. I got to start doing it.
The main thing is I'm drunk most of the time, so I have no inhibitions.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be honest. Honestly, the first stream I did lit. I drank a beer, and that was probably where I got my thoughts out in the most concise and clear way, oddly enough. It's bizarre, but it seems like I do a better show when I drink. I don't know what to say about it, but it just seems the case. I've thought about doing a show on acid, but
oh God,
I certainly wouldn't say it because YouTube has really serious policies against that shit at this point, as I understand.
Do they? Against that?
Dude, if you watch, there's a YouTuber named Psyched Substance. Have you ever come across him?
Yeah.
He gives like a billion fucking caveats when he does his videos, and they still get demonetized all the time. They're still fighting a war against him. And he's it annoys me because he's such a bitch about it all the time. Like, seriously, don't do drugs. Don't ever do them. You need to not do them. I'm not telling you to do them. And constantly talking shit about drugs while also doing self-help on drugs. And the reason is he's trying to fight the YouTube backlash, essentially.
That's some shit.
Yeah, I know. He used to just be real upfront and not really give all these caveats and hedges and shit. But, you know, that's YouTube.
That's fucking stupid.
Yeah.
That's YouTube. Fucking stupid.
I mean, you can probably get a video taken down for saying the N-word on YouTube, I'm guessing. I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, definitely you could do that. Sure.
Not that I ever would, but, you know. It's just not the same YouTube we grew up with, certainly. Can you believe this platform's fucking 15 years old, almost?
I know, that's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah. I just turned 25 last week, actually. Yeah, last week exactly, actually. Last Thursday. Congratulations to me. I think we're pretty much done, huh?
Quarter century.
We didn't get to Big Brother, but honestly,
shit.
We're not gonna have any disagreements there. We both agree Big Brother is fucking fucked.
Okay, but do these people know about this?
Okay. Let's talk about it in brief then. All right, so what's going on in China?
Can talk about it briefly, and it will be brief because we agree on this.
Yeah. What's going on? Fill me in.
So yeah. fucking, for those of you who don't know, China has been working on this new system since like 2015, and it's a social credit scoring system that is basically exactly the same thing as that Black Mirror episode, where they all just rate each other's interactions with each other. Every little thing they do, they just rate it, and that affects your general score. That affects whether or not you can get a certain job or apartment or whatever else. They're doing that over there, man. And they have people whose entire job it is to narc on their neighbors. And they have quotas too. Like, for how many people they're supposed to report. And if you get too low of a score, your kids can't go to certain schools. You can't get certain loans or jobs. You can't even get train tickets or plane tickets. You can't leave if your score is too low. Like, that's just absolutely fucked. But they've got hundreds of millions of cameras everywhere to track everything you're doing. And they're encouraging people to report you, because I believe if you report them, that helps your score. But what really worries me is that this is not going to stay in China. And in fact, it already is not staying in China. I found out recently there's a city in Australia that is now testing the very same system.
What?
Australia.
Are you
like
shitting
the very
me?
tip top of Australia. They're already testing it there now.
My God, man.
This is going to happen, dude. It's not staying there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd be worried about here, honestly, because there are some loose elements of that already. I mean, for example, like
Sure.
the credit system is, you know, it has it's supposed to have its utility, but in how it is in effect, it's massively fucked, because you can be super rich. You can be super rich and have a terrible credit score. You could be super poor and have a really good credit score. And it's really weighted on how much you borrow money. Like, we should not be incentivizing the borrowing of money, in my opinion. That's just me.
With the system, though, if you want to raise your score right, I mean, you've got to do either free labor for the state, so slave labor, or you've got to donate money to the government.
Oh my God.
Jesus won't be abused.
Of course.
Like, come on, man. This is like my worst nightmare come true, dude. I've been freaking the fuck out about this the past few nights.
Jesus, man. And
like, I knew about this, but I hadn't seen it.
Obviously, our surveillance state is also totally out of control. I mean, the NSA, not only is the NSA spying on all of us, they're spying on the world.
This is like a million times worse.
Yeah. And also that the stuff you talked about with like the facial recognition technology, that's being done here too. Amazon has a patent for that, actually, and they have ties with the CIA. They have projects with the CIA. So
all these phones are doing the same shit, like to unlock your phones and stuff.
Yeah. And if you don't think that's going to be integrated, they've had Microsoft, Apple, Google under their thumb.
Like, dude, why the fuck would you ever do that? Like, I've had this thumb scanner on the back of my phone. Right here.
Yeah.
I refuse to touch the motherfucker.
Yeah, I don't use it. I used to use it, now I don't.
Like, if I just accidentally touch the fucking thing, they're just like, oh, now we've got our chance. Fucking thumb.
Yeah.
I don't even want to fuck that, man.
That's fucked.
God, scares the shit out of me.
There's something else I was gonna say. Fuck. Lost my train of thought, though. God damn it. Let's see. So we covered NSA, credit. So no, I totally forgot it.
Same.
So what is that system called in China?
Well, it's like the social credit or scoring system or whatever the fuck. But like, dude, I saw like from NBC when they were covering this, when they had all the fucking panels up with the video footage of everything, it said fucking Skynet.
Yeah.
What kind of sick fucking joke because it's like there's one dude there who knows what that's from. Like there's one Terminator fan there and who's like, "Oh, this is just a cool name for it. Don't worry about it." Like, what the fuck? That's terrifying, man.
It is pretty
This
crazy.
is just a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And what do we do about it at this point? I mean, it just seems,
That's all you
yeah.
can do.
It seems so largely out of our. I mean, people just kind of grandfather in the NSA. Unfortunately, there was never even a debate, never a discussion.
No.
I mean, we didn't know to what extent it was, but then when the information came out and we knew exactly to what extent it was, it just
No one did anything.
it kind of people just seem to forget. I mean,
I went
that
out
one
and
went away
protested
without
this
even a
shit.
whimper. Not even a whimper.
I went out with this fucking thing and I protested this shit. No one cared.
Yeah.
No one gave a shit. You know, at one point though, the cops showed up, and I was really worried they were gonna like shut us down. But apparently, I had a friend of mine passing out flyers with all this information and everything, and he went up to the cop car and handed them a flyer. They were like, "Yeah, no, we're not here to like bust anything. We just really dig what you guys are saying."
That's badass.
I was like, "Fuck
That's
yes,
badass.
nice."
Oh.
Did not expect that.
We got to end the drug
I
war,
think
man.
First guest episode. I hope anyway.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I mean, I knew that I didn't want to get too deep into the weeds in this one. I just want to kind of get our opinions out there, and that way we kind of understand where each other's coming from more, because I know it's been a while. I just wanted to kind of catch up. And if we want to get more deep into a particular given issue in the future, we can, make it a real discussion and
If we do that,
come a little more prepared,
we need more preparation time.
Oh yeah.
If it's over one
And
particular issue.
I'm probably a beer. Couple of beers or something.
I had plenty. I went through like a whole 6-pack this fucking episode.
Yeah, that's probably why you were a little more loose than I am. I feel like I have really bad ADD right now. I don't know. Partially because I was distracted from the beginning. I've had people fucking ringing my ear off today for some reason. I don't know why. My phone's been going off constantly through this. Yeah, I just need to turn that fucker off. But
yeah, just put on silent and ignore the fucking thing.
And yesterday I don't know, should I say this? Fuck it. Fuck it.
That makes me really hope you say it.
I did some Xanax for the first time yesterday. Because I was this is one of those things that people talk about in our generation. Big Xanax problem. I don't know what the hell is up with this shit. I don't see hardly any utility in it. It just seems like one of those drugs. I'm not big on pills, and I don't see them as useful to me personally. They just make that one in particular just makes you kind of a zombie, right? And that's how I felt on it. And I woke up super groggy this morning. I felt like,
well, I guess it depends if you actually need it or not.
Yeah. The actual use, 0.25 megs for going on a plane. If you're going on a plane and you just like hate flying, and I'm right there with you, going on a plane makes me totally antsy. It's like, it's a terrifying experience when it's first lifting off and you feel yourself rising. But the people who just take Xanax for fun, it wasn't really fun. Honestly, to me, it felt like I was drunk, but more annoying, or more annoyed, I guess is probably. Yeah, and I just went right to sleep. I went right to sleep. Yeah.
So I didn't mind that either.
And I feel like that probably affected my performance today, unfortunately. But yeah.
Oh,
hopefully,
all right. You did great, man.
Yeah, we'll work out the kinks more and more. So, anyways, man, I guess we're done here.
I'm honored to be your first guest.
Yeah, I'm honored to have you. Appreciate it.
You.
And I appreciate your haircut.
Thank you.
God. Well, you take it easy. I'm going to go get some grub.
Fuck yeah.
Thanks for everybody watching and joining us. I will be clipping this out later on. Yeah, I'll take it easy. Peace.
Peace.